The first recorded encounters with the creatures that would later be classified as genestealers occurred during the 38th millennium, when Imperial exploration fleets pushing into the eastern fringe began reporting disturbing incidents aboard derelict vessels and abandoned space hulks. These initial contact reports, buried deep within the archives of the Ordo Xenos, describe encounters with organisms that defied conventional xenobiological classification. The creatures possessed an unsettling combination of chitinous armor plating, elongated skulls housing enlarged cranial cavities, and 4 arms terminating in razor-sharp talons capable of rending ceramite with ease. The Imgarl strain represents the most ancient and perhaps most terrifying variant of these organisms ever encountered by Imperial forces. First discovered within the twisted corridors of Space Hulk's Sin of Damnation, these particular genestealers displayed an ability that set them apart from their brethren, an unprecedented capacity for rapid biological adaptation. Unlike standard genestealer organisms, Imgarl genestealers could alter their physical structure within minutes, reshaping bone, muscle, and chitin to better suit their immediate tactical requirements. Their bodies could elongate to squeeze through impossibly narrow maintenance shafts, or bulk up with additional armor plating and enlarged talons when preparing for direct assault. Imperial forces first encountered these adaptive horrors during the cleansing operations of the 39th millennium, when Terminator squads from various Space Marine chapters began reporting casualties that defied explanation. Veterans who had faced orcs, chaos cultists, and demon spawn found themselves unprepared for an enemy that could literally reshape itself between encounters. The creatures would attack from ventilation systems as elongated, serpentine forms, then transform into heavily armored killing machines once combat was joined. Their adaptive capabilities extended beyond mere physical restructuring. They demonstrated an ability to alter their metabolic processes, becoming capable of surviving in environments that should have been instantly lethal to carbon-based life forms. The discovery of the Imgarl strain's true nature came through the sacrifice of countless Imperial Guard regiments and Space Marine companies. Each engagement revealed new aspects of their horrifying biology, yet the full scope of their purpose remained hidden until xenobiologists began studying captured specimens in specialized containment facilities. These studies revealed that genestealers, regardless of strain, shared certain fundamental characteristics that marked them as something far more dangerous than simple predatory xenos. The biological imperative driving every genestealer organism extends far beyond mere survival or territorial expansion. These creatures serve as the vanguard of something infinitely more terrible, the Tyrannid Hive fleets that prowl the void between galaxies, consuming all biological matter in their path. Genestealers function as advanced reconnaissance organisms, dispatched ahead of the main Tyrannid swarms to identify suitable worlds for consumption and to begin the process of preparing those worlds for harvest. Each genestealer carries within its genetic structure a complete biological profile of Tyrannid evolution, serving as a living repository of adaptive potential. When a genestealer infiltrates a world, it begins gathering genetic samples from the local population through its horrifying reproductive cycle. This information is then transmitted back to the approaching Hive fleet through psychic resonance, allowing the Tyrannids to begin adapting their bioforms to counter the specific threats and exploit the particular weaknesses they will encounter upon arrival. The process by which genestealers accomplish this genetic harvesting represents one of the most disturbing aspects of their biology. Each mature genestealer possesses a specialized organ called an ovipositor, located within its mouth cavity and protected by rows of needle-sharp teeth. This organ serves a dual purpose. It can inject a paralytic venom that renders victims helpless, and more significantly, it can implant genetic material directly into a host organism's reproductive system. The implantation process, colloquially known among Imperial forces as the Genestealer kiss, occurs when a genestealer restrains a victim and forces the ovipositor into direct contact with the host's mouth or throat. The organ extends deep into the victim's body, releasing a complex cocktail of genetic material hormones, and psychoactive compounds. This genetic payload does not simply replace the host's DNA. Instead, it integrates with existing genetic structures, creating a hybrid organism that retains the appearance and memories of the original host while carrying dormant tyrannid characteristics. Victims of Genestealer implantation experience no immediate physical changes. They retain their original personality, memories, and behavioral patterns, making detection virtually impossible through conventional means. The implanted genetic material remains dormant until the host reproduces, at which point the hybrid nature begins to manifest in their offspring. These first-generation hybrids display subtle mutations, slightly enlarged cranial capacity, increased physical strength, and an inexplicable psychological compulsion to protect and serve their Genestealer progenitor. The genetic degradation continues through subsequent generations, with each breeding cycle producing offspring that display increasingly obvious tyrannid characteristics. Second-generation hybrids may develop elongated limbs, chitinous growths beneath their skin, or enlarged sensory organs. Third-generation hybrids begin to lose their human appearance entirely, developing visible carapace segments, enlarged heads, and extended limbs. The fourth generation produces creatures that are barely recognizable as having human ancestry, possessing fully developed chitinous armor and multiple arms terminating in hardened talons. This generational progression serves multiple purposes within the Genestealer's biological imperative. Each generation of hybrids provides the parent organism with additional genetic diversity to transmit to the approaching Hive fleet, while simultaneously creating a growing population of creatures psychically linked to the Genestealer Patriarch. These hybrid populations form the foundation of Genestealer cults, serving as both a source of genetic material and a network of agents capable of undermining planetary defenses from within. The psychic connection between Genestealers and their hybrid offspring represents one of the most insidious aspects of their infiltration strategy. Genestealers function as synaptic creatures within the greater tyrannid hive mind network, capable of maintaining psychic communication across vast interstellar distances. This connection allows them to coordinate their activities with approaching hive fleets and to transmit detailed information about target worlds back to the main tyrannid force. The synaptic link operates on multiple levels of consciousness. At its most basic level, it provides Genestealers with an awareness of the general direction and approximate distance of the nearest hive fleet, creating an instinctive drive to prepare their infiltrated world for the eventual arrival of the swarm. More sophisticated Genestealers, particularly those that have established large cult followings, can access deeper levels of the hive mind network, receiving specific instructions about target priorities and tactical objectives. This psychic network extends to all creatures carrying Genestealer genetic material, creating a hidden web of influence that spans entire planetary populations. Hybrid cultists experience the connection as a form of religious revelation, interpreting the alien thoughts and impulses as divine guidance from their revered patriarch. They remain unaware of the true source of these psychic impressions, believing themselves to be faithful servants of a benevolent alien entity rather than unwitting agents of galactic destruction. The strength of the synaptic connection varies based on the proximity of the Genestealer Patriarch and the generation of the hybrid offspring. First and second generation hybrids maintain only a weak psychic link, experiencing occasional dreams or intuitive insights that guide their actions. Third and fourth generation hybrids develop much stronger connections, becoming capable of receiving direct psychic commands and coordinating complex operations across multiple cult cells. As hive fleets draw closer to infiltrated worlds, the synaptic network becomes increasingly active. Genestealer patriarchs begin receiving detailed tactical information about hive fleet capabilities and intended assault patterns, allowing them to position their cult forces to maximum advantage. Hybrid populations experience intensified psychic dreams and visions, driving them to accelerate their infiltration efforts and begin preparing for the approaching Day of Ascension, when their alien gods will finally arrive to transform their world. The discovery of this psychic network has proven to be one of the most challenging aspects of combating Genestealer infiltration. Imperial forces trained to detect conventional forms of psychic activity often fail to recognize the subtle influence of the hive-mind connection, as it operates on frequencies and patterns completely alien to human psychic phenomena. Even experienced psychers may mistake the alien thoughts for naturally occurring psychic background noise or attribute them to minor warp disturbances. The biological complexity of Genestealer organisms extends beyond their reproductive and psychic capabilities. Their physical structure represents millions of years of tyrannid evolution, refined through countless encounters with different species across multiple galaxies. Their chitinous exoskeleton provides protection equivalent to Imperial flak armor, while remaining flexible enough to allow rapid movement through confined spaces. Their enlarged cranial capacity houses not only an advanced brain capable of tactical planning and strategic thinking, but also specialized organs for processing and storing genetic information gathered from host populations. The four-armed configuration of Genestealer anatomy serves multiple tactical purposes. The upper pair of arms terminates in hands capable of fine manipulation, allowing them to operate human technology and weapons when necessary. The lower pair ends in hardened talons designed for close combat, capable of piercing ceramite armor and rending flesh with equal efficiency. This dual-purpose design makes Genestealers equally dangerous in stealth infiltration scenarios and direct combat situations. The insidious nature of Genestealer infiltration becomes fully apparent when examining the methodical progression of hybrid generations, each representing a calculated step in the systematic corruption of human bloodlines. This generational cycle operates according to precise biological imperatives encoded within Genestealer genetic material, creating a predictable yet horrifying transformation that spans multiple decades and affects entire family lineages across infiltrated worlds. First-generation hybrids emerge from the initial union between implanted humans and represent the most subtle manifestation of Genestealer corruption. These offspring retain almost entirely human appearance, displaying only minor physical anomalies that rarely attract attention from Imperial authorities or medical personnel. Their cranial capacity shows slight enlargement, typically within normal human variation ranges, while their muscle density increases beyond baseline human parameters. Most significantly, first-generation hybrids possess enhanced reflexes and improved coordination, traits that often manifest as exceptional athletic ability or combat prowess rather than obvious mutation. The psychological profile of first-generation hybrids reveals the true insidious nature of their condition. They experience an inexplicable attraction to underground spaces, abandoned industrial facilities, and forgotten sections of Hive cities. This compulsion drives them to seek employment in mining operations, maintenance crews, or sanitation departments where their activities remain largely unobserved. Their enhanced physical capabilities make them valuable workers in these dangerous professions, while their psychological conditioning ensures they establish hidden gathering places for future cult activities. First-generation hybrids demonstrate remarkable resistance to standard Imperial interrogation techniques and loyalty conditioning. Their minds operate according to hybrid logic patterns that blend human reasoning with alien instincts, making them capable of maintaining elaborate deceptions while genuinely believing in their assumed identities. They can pass standard loyalty screenings, serve effectively in Imperial Guard regiments, and even hold positions within planetary administrative structures without arousing suspicion. The reproductive imperative driving first-generation hybrids manifests as an overwhelming desire to establish large family units and maintain extensive social networks. They typically produce numerous offspring through unions with uninfected humans, accelerating the spread of Genestealer genetic material through target populations. Their natural charisma and enhanced physical attributes make them attractive partners, while their psychological conditioning drives them to seek positions of influence within their communities. Second-generation hybrids display increasingly obvious physical mutations while retaining sufficient human appearance to function within normal society. their limb proportions begin shifting toward Genestealer configurations, with arms becoming noticeably longer and fingers developing additional joints. Cranial expansion becomes more pronounced, often requiring specialized headgear or hairstyles to conceal the enlarged skull structure. Skin texture changes subtly, developing a slightly waxy appearance and increased resistance to temperature extremes. The enhanced musculature of second-generation hybrids grants them strength levels approaching those of unaugmented space marines, while their modified bone structure provides natural armor protection against small arms fire. Their sensory organs undergo significant enhancement, with enlarged eyes capable of operating in near-total darkness and modified auditory systems that can detect ultrasonic frequencies. These improvements make them exceptionally effective as cult enforcers and infiltration specialists. Second-generation hybrids experience stronger psychic connections to their Genestealer Patriarch, receiving regular dream visions that guide their activities and provide tactical information about cult objectives. These psychic impressions manifest as religious experiences, with the hybrids interpreting alien thoughts as divine revelations from their revered ancestor. The intensity of these connections varies based on proximity to the Patriarch and the overall size of the cult network. The behavioral patterns of second-generation hybrids reflect their dual nature as both human descendants and alien infiltrators. They maintain emotional attachments to family members and demonstrate genuine concern for human welfare, yet their actions consistently serve the greater objectives of the Genestealer Cult. This psychological duality creates internal conflicts that they resolve through elaborate rationalization processes, convincing themselves that their alien masters represent humanity's salvation rather than its destruction. Third-generation hybrids mark the point where Genestealer genetics begin overwhelming human characteristics, yet paradoxically, they often appear more human than their second-generation parents. This apparent regression toward human appearance represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of Genestealer biological engineering, creating infiltrators capable of operating undetected within the highest levels of Imperial society. Their facial features return to more human proportions, while their body structure becomes less obviously mutated despite retaining enhanced physical capabilities. The cranial modifications in third-generation hybrids become more subtle, with enlarged brain capacity concealed behind apparently normal skull dimensions. Their enhanced cognitive abilities manifest as exceptional intelligence, strategic thinking capabilities, and remarkable social manipulation skills. These traits make them natural leaders within human society, often rising to positions of authority in planetary governments, military commands, or commercial enterprises. Third-generation hybrids possess the most refined psychic connections to the Broodmind network, capable of receiving complex tactical instructions and coordinating cult activities across multiple planetary regions. Their enhanced mental capabilities allow them to process and interpret alien thought patterns while maintaining their human personality facades. This dual consciousness creates highly effective double agents who genuinely believe in their human identities while unconsciously serving Genestealer objectives. The reproductive biology of third-generation hybrids demonstrates the calculated nature of Genestealer genetic manipulation. When they mate with uninfected humans, their offspring typically appear completely human while carrying dormant Genestealer genetic markers. These fourth-generation hybrids can remain undetected for decades, serving as sleeper agents within Imperial institutions until psychic activation triggers their transformation into pure Genestealer organisms. Fourth-generation hybrids represent the culmination of the generational cycle, emerging as creatures that have shed almost all human characteristics to become Purestrains virtually indistinguishable from their original Genestealer ancestors. These organisms possess the full range of Genestealer capabilities, including the ability to implant new victims and establish fresh cult bloodlines. Their transformation typically occurs during adolescence, triggered by psychic signals from the Patriarch or proximity to approaching tyrannid forces. The physical transformation of fourth-generation hybrids involves rapid bone restructuring, muscle development, and the emergence of chitinous armor plating beneath their skin. Their limbs elongate and multiply, developing the characteristic four-armed configuration of mature genestealers. Their cranial capacity expands dramatically to accommodate enlarged brain structures and specialized psychic organs. The entire process occurs over several weeks, during which the transforming hybrid experiences intense pain and psychological trauma. Fourth-generation Purestrains retain fragmented memories of their human existence, creating psychological profiles that blend alien instincts with human emotional responses. This combination makes them unpredictable opponents, capable of both calculated strategic planning and sudden fits of human like rage or grief. Their retained human memories provide valuable intelligence about Imperial defenses and social structures, while their genestealer instincts drive them to expand cult influence and prepare for tyrannid arrival. The Broodmind connection that binds all generations of hybrids represents the most insidious aspect of genestealer infiltration, functioning as both a communication network and a system of psychological conditioning. This psychic web operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, influencing hybrid behavior through subtle emotional manipulation and subconscious suggestion. Hybrids experience the connection as a constant background presence, providing comfort and guidance while gradually eroding their individual autonomy. The psychological conditioning transmitted through the Broodmind creates fanatical devotion to the Genestealer Patriarch and unquestioning acceptance of cult objectives. Hybrids interpret their psychic experiences as religious revelations, developing elaborate theological frameworks that cast their alien ancestors as benevolent saviors come to deliver humanity from suffering and ignorance. These belief systems become increasingly sophisticated as cult populations grow, incorporating elements of existing human religions while maintaining their alien core. The conditioning process operates through multiple psychological mechanisms, including memory modification, emotional manipulation, and the gradual replacement of human moral frameworks with alien value systems. Hybrids retain their human personalities and emotional attachments, but their decision-making processes become increasingly influenced by alien priorities. They genuinely believe their actions serve humanity's best interests, even when those actions involve betraying human defensive positions or sabotaging Imperial installations. Resistance to Broodmind conditioning proves virtually impossible once the psychic connection establishes itself. The alien influence operates at neurochemical levels, altering brain chemistry and neural pathway development in ways that make independent thought increasingly difficult. Hybrids who attempt to resist the conditioning experience severe psychological distress, including anxiety, depression, and dissociative episodes that typically drive them back to cult communities for relief. The Patriarch serves as the focal point of the entire cult bloodline, functioning simultaneously as progenitor, spiritual leader, and psychic nexus for the Broodmind network. These ancient genestealers have survived for centuries or millennia, accumulating vast experience in human psychology and Imperial defensive systems, while building extensive cult networks across multiple worlds. Their enhanced psychic capabilities allow them to maintain connections with dozens of cult cells simultaneously while coordinating long-term infiltration strategies. Patriarchs typically establish themselves in secure underground locations, often within the deepest levels of Hive cities or abandoned mining complexes, where their presence remains undetected by Imperial authorities. These lairs become the spiritual centers of cult worship, decorated with hybrid artwork depicting the Patriarch as a divine figure surrounded by adoring human followers. The Patriarch's physical presence radiates psychic influence that intensifies the Broodmind connection and reinforces cult conditioning among visiting hybrids. The advanced age and experience of most Patriarchs grants them sophisticated understanding of human social structures and Imperial administrative systems. They guide cult infiltration efforts with strategic precision, identifying key targets within planetary governments and military commands while avoiding actions that might trigger Imperial investigation. Their long-term planning capabilities allow them to coordinate cult activities across multiple generations, ensuring steady progress toward their ultimate objective of planetary conquest. The transformation from scattered hybrid families into organized Genestealer cults represents one of the most methodical and terrifying infiltration processes ever documented by Imperial authorities. Unlike the chaotic corruption of chaos cults or the obvious threat of Xenos invasion, Genestealer cults emerge from within human society itself, using existing social structures and institutions as camouflage for their insidious expansion. The process begins decades before any Imperial authority recognizes the threat, starting with the careful placement of hybrid agents within key positions throughout planetary infrastructure. The establishment of cult cells follows patterns that exploit fundamental weaknesses in Imperial administrative systems. First and second generation hybrids, with their enhanced physical capabilities and subtle psychological conditioning, naturally gravitate toward employment in essential services that Imperial oversight often neglects. Mining guilds, sanitation departments, maintenance crews, and cargo handling operations become the primary vectors for cult infiltration, as these organizations operate in the forgotten spaces beneath civilized society where hybrid activities can proceed unobserved. Within these industrial environments, hybrid workers demonstrate exceptional competence and reliability, quickly earning the trust of human supervisors while establishing informal networks of mutual support and protection. Their enhanced strength and endurance make them valuable employees in dangerous occupations, while their psychological conditioning drives them to seek positions that provide access to critical infrastructure. Over time, entire work crews become dominated by hybrid personnel, creating secure environments where cult activities can develop without external interference. The infiltration process accelerates as second and third generation hybrids begin assuming supervisory roles within these organizations. Their enhanced cognitive abilities and natural charisma make them effective leaders, while their alien influence perspective allows them to identify strategic opportunities that pure humans might overlook. They implement subtle changes in work schedules, security protocols, and personnel assignments that create additional opportunities for cult expansion while maintaining the appearance of normal operational efficiency. Key institutions targeted by Genestealer cults include planetary defense forces, where hybrid soldiers can gather intelligence about defensive capabilities while positioning themselves to sabotage critical systems during eventual Tyrannid assault. The Adeptus Arbites presents a particular challenge for cult infiltration due to their rigorous screening procedures. Yet patient hybrid agents have successfully penetrated local enforcement agencies by demonstrating exceptional performance in dangerous assignments and building reputations as reliable officers devoted to Imperial law. Administrative positions within planetary governments offer cult agents access to population records, resource allocation data, and strategic planning information that proves invaluable for coordinating cult expansion. Hybrid bureaucrats excel in these roles, their enhanced mental capabilities allowing them to process vast amounts of information, while their psychological conditioning drives them to identify opportunities for advancing cult objectives. They gradually modify record-keeping systems, alter personnel assignments, and influence policy decisions in ways that facilitate further infiltration while remaining virtually undetectable. The hierarchical structure that emerges within established Genestealer cults reflects both human organizational patterns and alien biological imperatives, creating a unique fusion of familiar social dynamics and utterly foreign priorities. At the foundation of this structure lie the neophyte hybrids, typically first and second generation descendants, who retain almost entirely human appearance while possessing enhanced physical capabilities and unwavering devotion to cult objectives. These individuals form the backbone of cult operations, carrying out essential tasks that require interaction with uninfected human populations. Neophyte hybrids serve as the cult's primary interface with normal Imperial society, maintaining employment in legitimate occupations while secretly advancing cult interests through their daily activities. Their enhanced strength and endurance make them exceptional workers in industrial environments, while their psychological conditioning ensures absolute loyalty to cult leadership. They establish safe houses, gather intelligence about Imperial defensive preparations, and recruit new members through careful manipulation of human social networks. The recruitment process, orchestrated by neophyte hybrids, exploits fundamental human psychological vulnerabilities, particularly the desire for belonging and purpose that Imperial society often fails to provide. They identify individuals suffering from social isolation, economic hardship, or disillusionment with Imperial authority, approaching them with offers of friendship, employment opportunities, and inclusion in supportive community organizations. The initial contact appears entirely benign, focusing on practical assistance rather than ideological conversion. Acolyte hybrids occupy the intermediate levels of cult hierarchy, typically consisting of third-generation descendants, whose refined human appearance conceals advanced alien capabilities. These individuals often hold positions of authority within legitimate Imperial institutions, using their influence to protect cult operations while advancing infiltration efforts. Their enhanced cognitive abilities allow them to process complex strategic information and coordinate activities across multiple cult cells without arousing suspicion from Imperial oversight. The psychological profile of acolyte hybrids demonstrates the sophisticated nature of Genestealer conditioning, as they genuinely believe their actions serve humanity's best interests while unconsciously advancing alien objectives. They view themselves as enlightened individuals working to prepare their world for a glorious transformation that will eliminate suffering and inequality. This sincere conviction makes them exceptionally effective recruiters, as their passionate advocacy for cult ideals appears authentic to potential converts. Above the acolyte ranks emerge the metamorph hybrids, typically fourth-generation descendants, whose alien characteristics become increasingly apparent despite their retention of human intelligence and social skills. These individuals serve as enforcers and specialists within cult operations, their enhanced physical capabilities making them deadly combatants, while their retained human memories provide valuable intelligence about Imperial defensive systems. Metamorphs often operate in small teams, carrying out assassinations, sabotage operations, and direct assaults against threats to cult security. The Magus represents the pinnacle of hybrid evolution within cult hierarchy, typically a third-generation descendant whose exceptional psychic abilities and strategic intelligence make them natural leaders. These individuals possess the strongest connections to the Broodmind network, receiving direct guidance from the Patriarch while maintaining sophisticated human personalities that allow them to operate at the highest levels of Imperial society. Many Magi hold positions as planetary governors, military commanders, or industrial magnates, using their legitimate authority to protect and advance cult interests. The role of human converts within Genestealer cults demonstrates the sophisticated psychological manipulation techniques employed by hybrid leadership to expand their influence beyond genetic bloodlines. These uninfected humans become devoted cult members through carefully orchestrated recruitment processes that exploit their psychological vulnerabilities while gradually reshaping their worldview to align with cult objectives. The conversion process typically spans months or years, beginning with practical assistance and social inclusion before progressing to ideological indoctrination. Human converts serve essential functions within cult operations, particularly in roles that require interaction with Imperial authorities or access to sensitive information. Their unmodified genetics allow them to pass standard screening procedures that might detect hybrid characteristics, while their genuine conviction makes them effective advocates for cult ideals. Many converts rise to positions of significant authority within planetary governments or military commands, providing cult leadership with invaluable intelligence and operational support. The psychological conditioning of human converts relies heavily on the development of elaborate belief systems that reinterpret cult activities within familiar religious or philosophical frameworks. Cult leadership presents their alien masters as benevolent entities who have come to liberate humanity from the oppression and suffering imposed by Imperial authority. They describe the approaching transformation as a divine ascension that will elevate worthy humans to a higher plane of existence while eliminating those corrupted by Imperial indoctrination. These belief systems incorporate elements from existing human religions, particularly those emphasizing salvation through suffering and the eventual arrival of divine saviors. Cult theologians, typically magus-level hybrids with sophisticated understanding of human psychology, craft complex doctrines that address common human concerns about mortality, purpose, and social justice. They present detailed prophecies describing the coming transformation while providing practical guidance for preparing worthy souls for ascension. The development of cult iconography reflects the fusion of human artistic traditions with alien biological imagery, creating visual symbols that appeal to human aesthetic sensibilities while subtly reinforcing psychological conditioning. Early cult artwork typically features abstract designs incorporating four-pointed stars, spiral patterns, and geometric forms that echo tyrannid biological structures without obviously revealing their alien origin. These symbols appear in cult gathering places, personal accessories worn by members, and graffiti marking cult territory within urban environments. As cult populations grow and their confidence increases, iconographic representations become more explicitly alien in nature. Advanced cult installations feature elaborate murals depicting hybrid figures in positions of reverence before towering alien forms, while sculptural elements incorporate chitinous textures and organic curves that mirror Genestealer anatomy. The four-armed spiral becomes a dominant motif, representing the cult's connection to their alien progenitors while symbolizing the cyclical nature of genetic transformation. Ritual practices within established Genestealer cults blend human ceremonial traditions with activities designed to strengthen Broodmind connections and reinforce psychological conditioning. Regular gatherings take place in hidden locations throughout infiltrated settlements, typically in abandoned industrial facilities, forgotten maintenance tunnels, or specially constructed underground chambers. These meetings serve multiple purposes, providing opportunities for intelligence sharing, operational planning, and spiritual reinforcement of cult beliefs. The central ritual of most cult gatherings involves collective meditation focused on the Patriarch, with participants arranged in concentric circles around a central altar or symbolic representation of their alien master. Hybrid participants experience intensified Broodmind connections during these ceremonies, receiving shared visions and psychic impressions that guide cult activities while reinforcing their devotion to alien objectives. Human converts participate in modified versions of these rituals, experiencing psychological effects that strengthen their commitment without exposing them to potentially dangerous psychic phenomena. Worship of the star gods represents the theological culmination of cult belief systems, presenting Tyrannid Hive fleets as divine entities whose arrival will bring about universal transformation and enlightenment. Cult doctrine describes these entities as ancient beings who have traveled between galaxies for eons, gathering wisdom and power while searching for worlds worthy of their attention. The approaching Hive fleet becomes a divine visitation that will judge humanity and elevate the worthy while cleansing the galaxy of corruption and ignorance. The recruitment promises made by cult agents exploit fundamental human desires for equality, liberation, and transcendence that Imperial society often fails to satisfy. They present cult membership as an opportunity to join an enlightened community where individual worth is recognized regardless of social background or economic status. Potential recruits are promised positions of authority and respect within the coming new order, while being assured that their families will be protected and elevated during the approaching transformation. These recruitment efforts target specific demographic groups that demonstrate particular vulnerability to cult messaging, including industrial workers subjected to dangerous conditions and minimal compensation, citizens of lower Hive levels who face constant threats from criminal organizations, and individuals who have suffered personal tragedies that Imperial authorities failed to address adequately. Cult recruiters present themselves as representatives of a powerful organization capable of providing protection, resources, and opportunities for advancement that Imperial institutions cannot match. The promises of liberation from Imperial oppression resonate particularly strongly with populations that have experienced harsh treatment from Imperial authorities or witnessed the arbitrary exercise of power by corrupt officials. Cult agents present detailed accounts of Imperial failures and injustices while describing their organization as a force for positive change that will establish fair and just governance once their divine patrons arrive. They emphasize themes of universal brotherhood and shared prosperity that contrast sharply with the hierarchical inequalities that characterize most Imperial worlds. The theological framework that emerges within mature Genestealer cults represents one of the most sophisticated forms of religious corruption ever documented by Imperial authorities, transforming the alien biological imperative of tyrannid consumption into a divine mandate for universal salvation. The Patriarch assumes the role of a messianic figure within this twisted cosmology, presented to cult members as the earthly avatar of cosmic entities whose wisdom and power transcend human comprehension. This theological construct exploits fundamental human needs for spiritual meaning and divine purpose, recontextualizing the horror of alien infiltration as a blessed transformation ordained by benevolent gods. The central doctrine of cult theology positions the Patriarch as the first among the chosen, a divine messenger who has achieved perfect union with the star gods and now serves as their representative among humanity. Cult teachings describe the Patriarch's transformation from human to hybrid as a sacred metamorphosis that demonstrates the potential for all faithful followers to transcend their mortal limitations. The alien characteristics that mark the Patriarch as obviously non-human become symbols of divine favor rather than signs of corruption, with each chitinous plate and elongated limb representing a step closer to perfect communion with cosmic forces. This reinterpretation of obvious mutation as divine blessing creates a psychological framework that allows cult members to view increasingly alien transformations with reverence rather than horror. First and second generation hybrids learn to see their subtle physical modifications as signs of divine selection, while later generations embrace their more dramatic changes as evidence of their approaching ascension to a higher plane of existence. The psychological conditioning reinforced through Broodmind connections ensures that even the most dramatic physical transformations are experienced as spiritual achievements rather than losses of humanity. The star gods themselves occupy the apex of cult cosmology, presented as ancient entities who have traveled between galaxies since the dawn of time, gathering knowledge and power while seeking worlds worthy of their divine attention. Cult doctrine describes these beings as the original creators of life throughout the universe, entities whose infinite wisdom guided the development of countless species across multiple galaxies before finally turning their attention to humanity. The approaching Hive fleets become divine armadas carrying these cosmic deities to fulfill ancient prophecies about universal transformation and enlightenment. The theological narrative constructed around the star gods draws heavily from existing human religious traditions while subtly subverting their core messages to serve alien objectives. Cult scholars, typically Magus-level hybrids with sophisticated understanding of human psychology and theology, craft elaborate doctrines that incorporate familiar concepts of divine judgment, salvation through faith, and the eventual establishment of a perfect society free from suffering and inequality. These teachings present the tyrannid consumption of biomass as a form of divine communion that elevates consumed organisms to a higher state of existence within the collective consciousness of the star gods. The corruption of Imperial creed symbols represents one of the most insidious aspects of cult theological development, as hybrid leadership systematically reinterprets sacred Imperial iconography to support their alien agenda, while maintaining sufficient familiarity to avoid immediate detection by Imperial authorities. The Imperial Aquila undergoes subtle modification within cult contexts, with the traditional two-headed eagle transformed into a four-armed spiral that maintains the basic visual structure while incorporating Genestealer anatomical elements. This modified symbol appears in cult gathering places and personal accessories worn by members, serving as a recognition sign that appears orthodox to casual observation. The sacred number 8, traditionally associated with Imperial military organization and administrative structure, acquires new significance within cult theology as representing the 8 generations of hybrid development that culminate in perfect union with the star gods. Cult doctrine describes this numerical progression as a divine pattern encoded within the universe itself, with each generation representing a step in the cosmic plan for human elevation. The traditional Imperial emphasis on duty, sacrifice, and service to the Emperor becomes recontextualized as preparation for service to the star gods, with cult members encouraged to demonstrate their worthiness through absolute devotion to their alien masters. Imperial prayer rituals undergo systematic modification within cult communities, with traditional invocations to the Emperor replaced by appeals to the star gods, while maintaining familiar ceremonial structures that avoid arousing suspicion among uninfected populations. The traditional Imperial prayer position, with hands clasped and head bowed, becomes modified to incorporate the four-armed gesture, with cult members extending their arms in positions that mirror Genestealer anatomy while maintaining the appearance of conventional devotion. These modified prayers often include references to transformation, ascension, and the coming of divine messengers that sound appropriately Imperial to casual listeners while reinforcing cult conditioning among initiated members. The reinterpretation of Imperial feast days and ceremonial observances creates opportunities for cult members to gather and reinforce their beliefs while maintaining the appearance of orthodox religious practice. Traditional celebrations of Imperial military victories become recontextualized as commemorations of divine interventions that prepared humanity for eventual contact with the star gods. The Emperor's ascension becomes interpreted as a prophetic event that foreshadowed the coming transformation of all humanity, with the Golden Throne described as a primitive attempt to achieve the perfect union with cosmic forces that the star gods will soon provide to all worthy followers. The promise of ascension serves as the fundamental motivational force driving cult member devotion, offering transcendence from the harsh realities of Imperial life through transformation into beings capable of existing on multiple planes of reality simultaneously. Cult doctrine describes the ascension process as a gradual elevation of consciousness that begins with acceptance of the star god's message and culminates in physical transformation that grants access to cosmic knowledge and power. This theological framework recontextualizes the horrific reality of tyrannid consumption as a blessed merger with divine entities that preserves individual consciousness while expanding awareness to encompass universal truth. The theological description of ascension draws heavily from human concepts of spiritual enlightenment while incorporating alien elements that reflect tyrannid biological processes. Cult teachings describe the transformed state as one of perfect harmony between individual consciousness and collective wisdom, where personal desires align completely with cosmic purpose while retaining the essential characteristics that define individual identity. The loss of human form becomes presented as liberation from the limitations of flesh, while the merger with alien consciousness becomes described as expansion rather than absorption. Cult members learn to view the physical transformations occurring within their bloodlines as external manifestations of internal spiritual development, with each generation of hybrid offspring representing progress toward the ultimate goal of perfect communion with the star gods. Parents celebrate the increasingly alien appearance of their children as evidence of divine favor, while hybrid offspring learn to see their mutations as marks of distinction that separate them from the unenlightened masses still trapped within purely human limitations. This psychological conditioning ensures that even the most dramatic physical changes are experienced as achievements rather than losses. The promise of transformation extends beyond individual ascension to encompass the complete renovation of human society according to divine principles that eliminate inequality, suffering, and conflict through perfect unity of purpose. Cult doctrine describes the coming transformation as the establishment of a universal brotherhood where all beings exist in harmony under the guidance of the star gods, with former divisions of class, race, and planetary origin becoming irrelevant in the face of shared divine purpose. This vision appeals particularly strongly to populations suffering under oppressive imperial conditions, offering hope for fundamental change that imperial institutions seem incapable of providing. Ritual scarification emerges as a central practice within established cult communities, serving both as a form of spiritual discipline and as a method for strengthening psychological conditioning among cult members. These ceremonies typically take place during regular cult gatherings, with participants voluntarily submitting to carefully controlled cutting procedures that create permanent marks representing their devotion to the star gods. The scarification patterns incorporate geometric designs that echo tyrannid biological structures while maintaining sufficient abstraction to avoid immediate recognition by imperial authorities. The scarification process serves multiple psychological functions within cult communities, creating shared experiences of pain and healing that strengthen bonds between members while demonstrating individual commitment to cult ideals. Participants describe the cutting ceremonies as spiritually transformative experiences that create direct connections to the Broodmind network, with the physical pain serving as a gateway to enhanced psychic awareness and deeper communion with the Patriarch. The resulting scars become sources of pride and recognition within cult communities, marking individuals as fully committed members who have demonstrated their willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. Advanced scarification practices incorporate the introduction of foreign materials into healing wounds, including fragments of chitin harvested from shed Genestealer skin or specially prepared organic compounds that promote unusual healing patterns. These materials create raised scar tissue with distinctive textures and colors that more closely resemble alien biological structures, allowing cult members to gradually modify their appearance in ways that bring them closer to their hybrid ideals. The incorporation of alien biological material into human flesh serves as a symbolic representation of the merger between human and star god consciousness that cult doctrine promises to all faithful followers. The worship of mutation as divine blessing represents the complete inversion of imperial attitudes toward genetic purity, transforming the horror of alien contamination into a source of spiritual pride and religious devotion. Cult communities celebrate the birth of hybrid offspring with elaborate ceremonies that present physical mutations as visible manifestations of divine favor, with parents encouraged to display their children's alien characteristics as evidence of their family's special relationship with the star gods. These celebrations include ritualized presentations where hybrid children are formally recognized as blessed beings destined for important roles within the cosmic plan. Mutation worship extends beyond hybrid offspring to encompass any form of genetic variation that can be interpreted as movement toward the alien ideal, including naturally occurring human mutations that bear superficial resemblance to tyrannid characteristics. Cult communities often adopt individuals with physical disabilities or unusual genetic traits, recontextualizing their conditions as signs of divine selection, while providing them with supportive environments where their differences are celebrated rather than stigmatized. This inclusive approach to mutation serves both theological and practical purposes, expanding cult membership while reinforcing the doctrine that transformation rather than purity represents the highest spiritual achievement. The celebration of xenos-tainted as divine blessing creates elaborate ceremonial frameworks that honor the alien influence pervading cult communities, while maintaining sufficient secrecy to avoid imperial detection. These ceremonies typically involve the ritualized consumption of specially prepared foods that incorporate alien biological materials, creating shared experiences that strengthen Broodmind connections while reinforcing cult conditioning among participants. The alien materials are presented as sacred substances that facilitate communion with the star gods, with their consumption described as a form of spiritual nourishment that prepares participants for eventual transformation. The theological justification for embracing xenos influence relies on complex doctrinal arguments that reinterpret imperial teachings about genetic purity and alien corruption. Cult scholars present detailed theological treatises arguing that the traditional imperial fear of alien influence represents a fundamental misunderstanding of cosmic design, with humanity's destiny requiring integration with superior alien consciousness rather than isolation from external influence. These arguments draw heavily from obscure imperial theological texts, while incorporating alien concepts in ways that appear to represent advanced human religious thinking rather than obvious corruption. The celebration of alien influence extends to the modification of cult-gathering spaces with decorative elements that incorporate tyrannid biological motifs while maintaining sufficient abstraction to avoid immediate recognition. Cult artisans create elaborate murals depicting abstract forms that suggest alien anatomical structures without obviously representing non-human entities, while sculptural elements incorporate organic curves and chitinous textures that create atmospheres of otherworldly beauty rather than obvious corruption. These artistic expressions serve as focal points for meditation and worship, while gradually conditioning cult members to find alien forms aesthetically pleasing rather than disturbing. The development of hybrid artistic traditions reflects the fusion of human creative expression with alien aesthetic sensibilities transmitted through Broodmind connections, creating unique forms of cultural expression that serve both artistic and religious purposes within cult communities. Hybrid artists produce works that incorporate mathematical patterns derived from tyrannid biological structures, while maintaining sufficient human elements to appeal to uninfected audiences, creating art that serves as both camouflage and recruitment tool. These artistic works often feature recurring motifs of transformation, unity, and transcendence that reinforce cult theological messages while appearing to represent advanced human philosophical thinking. The integration of alien biological rhythms into cult ceremonial practices creates worship experiences that synchronize with tyrannid metabolic cycles while appearing to represent sophisticated human religious development. Cult gatherings follow timing patterns that correspond to Hive fleet movement cycles and Patriarch feeding schedules, creating ceremonial calendars that strengthen Broodmind connections while maintaining the appearance of traditional religious observance. These timing patterns often incorporate elements from existing human religious calendars, while introducing subtle modifications that align cult activities with alien biological imperatives. The hierarchical structure of Genestealer cults extends far beyond the simple generational progression of hybrid bloodlines, encompassing a complex network of specialized roles and responsibilities that mirror the sophisticated organization of imperial institutions while serving entirely alien objectives. At the foundation of this structure, neophyte hybrids represent the most numerous and visible component of cult membership, serving as the primary interface between alien infiltration and human society. These individuals, typically first and second generation descendants, retain sufficiently human appearance to operate within normal imperial communities while possessing enhanced physical capabilities that make them exceptionally effective in their assigned roles. Neophyte hybrids form the backbone of cult military forces, their enhanced strength, reflexes, and endurance making them formidable combatants despite their relatively human appearance. Their muscle density exceeds baseline human parameters by significant margins, allowing them to wield heavy weapons with ease while maintaining the mobility necessary for guerrilla warfare tactics. Their modified bone structure provides natural resistance to small arms fire, while their enhanced cardiovascular systems grant stamina levels that allow sustained combat operations far beyond normal human capabilities. The combat effectiveness of neophyte hybrids stems not only from their physical enhancements, but also from their psychological conditioning, which eliminates the fear responses and self-preservation instincts that limit ordinary human soldiers. They approach combat situations with calculated aggression, viewing violence as a necessary tool for advancing cult objectives, rather than as a source of personal trauma or moral conflict. Their enhanced pain tolerance allows them to continue fighting through injuries that would incapacitate normal humans, while their alien-influenced psychology enables them to coordinate tactical movements with precision that approaches the efficiency of Space Marine combat squads. Within cult military organization, neophyte hybrids typically operate in small units of 8 to 12 individuals, a number that reflects both practical tactical considerations and the theological significance of the 8-generation cycle within cult doctrine. These squads demonstrate remarkable cohesion and tactical flexibility, capable of adapting their combat approach to suit immediate battlefield conditions while maintaining focus on strategic objectives. Their enhanced sensory capabilities allow them to operate effectively in low light conditions and detect threats that would escape normal human perception, making them particularly effective in urban warfare environments and underground combat operations. The weaponry favored by neophyte hybrid units reflects their dual role as both insurgent fighters and industrial workers, with many of their armaments consisting of modified mining equipment, construction tools, and improvised explosive devices crafted from materials readily available within Imperial industrial facilities. Auto pistols and stub rifles form the core of their small arms inventory, weapons that are common enough throughout Imperial space to avoid attracting attention from authorities, while providing sufficient firepower for most combat situations. Heavy stubbers and mining lasers serve as squad support weapons, their industrial origins providing perfect camouflage for cult armament programs. The integration of neophyte hybrids within legitimate Imperial society serves multiple strategic purposes beyond simple infiltration, as their enhanced capabilities make them genuinely valuable employees within dangerous industrial occupations. Mining operations, construction projects, and hazardous waste processing facilities benefit significantly from workers who can operate safely in environments that would quickly kill normal humans, while their psychological conditioning ensures absolute reliability and dedication to assigned tasks. This genuine utility creates natural career advancement opportunities that place hybrid agents in supervisory positions where they can influence hiring decisions and operational procedures. Neophyte hybrids serving within Imperial Guard regiments represent some of the most dangerous infiltration agents within cult organizations, as their enhanced combat capabilities allow them to excel in military service while gathering detailed intelligence about Imperial defensive capabilities and strategic planning. Their natural resistance to battlefield stress and enhanced physical performance often leads to rapid promotion through enlisted ranks, placing them in positions where they can influence unit deployment and tactical decisions. During crucial moments, these embedded agents can sabotage communications equipment, provide enemy forces with detailed information about defensive positions, or coordinate synchronized attacks that exploit specific weaknesses in Imperial battle lines. The psychological profile of neophyte hybrids demonstrates the sophisticated nature of alien conditioning, as they maintain genuine emotional attachments to human comrades and superiors while remaining absolutely loyal to cult objectives. This emotional duality creates internal conflicts that they resolve through elaborate rationalization processes, convincing themselves that their sabotage activities ultimately serve the best interests of their human colleagues by hastening the arrival of the star gods who will eliminate suffering and conflict throughout the galaxy. Their ability to maintain these contradictory beliefs simultaneously makes them exceptionally effective double agents who can pass even intensive psychological screening procedures. Acolyte hybrids occupy the intermediate levels of cult hierarchy, typically consisting of 3rd and 4th generation descendants whose refined physical capabilities and enhanced cognitive functions make them natural leaders within both cult organizations and legitimate Imperial institutions. These individuals possess the optimal combination of human appearance and alien enhancement, allowing them to operate at the highest levels of Imperial society while maintaining the physical and mental capabilities necessary for direct combat operations when circumstances require violent action. The enhanced physical capabilities of Acolyte hybrids approach those of Space Marine Scouts, with strength levels that allow them to crush human skulls with their bare hands while maintaining sufficient manual dexterity to perform delicate technical operations. Their modified skeletal structure incorporates additional joint articulations that grant flexibility and range of motion far beyond human norms, while their enhanced muscle fiber density provides explosive power that can drive their limbs through ceramite armor plating. These physical modifications remain concealed beneath apparently normal human anatomy, allowing them to function as sleeper agents within Imperial organizations until circumstances require the revelation of their true nature. The cognitive enhancements possessed by Acolyte hybrids manifest as exceptional strategic thinking capabilities, pattern recognition skills, and social manipulation abilities that make them extraordinarily effective leaders and administrators. Their enlarged cranial capacity houses brain structures that process information at rates approaching those of cogitator systems, while their enhanced memory retention allows them to maintain detailed mental maps of complex organizational structures and individual psychological profiles. These mental capabilities, combined with their alien-influenced perspective on human behavior, make them masters of social engineering who can manipulate entire populations through carefully orchestrated influence campaigns. Acolyte hybrids serving as cult enforcers demonstrate combat capabilities that rival those of Imperial assassins, combining enhanced physical attributes with tactical training that exploits their alien advantages to maximum effect. Their preferred combat style emphasizes speed and precision over brute force, using their enhanced reflexes and flexibility to avoid enemy attacks while delivering precisely targeted strikes that exploit anatomical weak points. Their natural resistance to pain and enhanced healing capabilities allow them to absorb significant damage while continuing to fight, making them exceptionally dangerous opponents in close combat situations. The infiltration capabilities of Acolyte hybrids within Imperial administrative structures prove particularly devastating, as their enhanced cognitive abilities allow them to process and manipulate vast amounts of bureaucratic information, while their psychological conditioning drives them to identify opportunities for advancing cult objectives. They excel in positions requiring complex analytical thinking and strategic planning, often rising to senior administrative roles where they can influence resource allocation, personnel assignments, and policy development. Their modifications to official records and procedures typically remain undetected for years or decades, creating systematic weaknesses that cult forces can exploit during eventual uprising operations. Acolyte hybrids assigned to military infiltration roles demonstrate exceptional performance in officer training programs, their enhanced mental capabilities allowing them to master tactical doctrine and strategic theory, while their physical enhancements ensure superior performance in combat exercises. Their natural leadership abilities and genuine concern for subordinate welfare make them popular commanders among normal human troops, creating loyalty bonds that can be exploited during crucial moments when cult objectives require the betrayal of Imperial forces. Their detailed knowledge of Imperial military procedures and defensive capabilities proves invaluable for coordinating cult uprising operations and Tyrannid assault preparations. The Magus represents the pinnacle of hybrid evolution within cult leadership structures, typically a third-generation descendant whose exceptional psychic abilities and strategic intelligence make them the spiritual and operational leaders of entire cult networks. These individuals possess the strongest connections to the Broodmind network while maintaining sophisticated human personalities that allow them to operate at the highest levels of Imperial society without arousing suspicion. Their psychic capabilities rival those of sanctioned Imperial psychers, while their alien-influenced perspective grants them insights into human psychology that make them extraordinarily effective manipulators and leaders. The psychic powers wielded by Magus-level hybrids derive from their direct connection to the Broodmind network, channeling alien mental energies through human neural structures modified by generations of genetic manipulation. Their abilities typically manifest as enhanced telepathic sensitivity, allowing them to read surface thoughts and emotional states with remarkable accuracy, while their connection to the Patriarch grants them access to shared memories and experiences accumulated across decades or centuries of cult operations. These psychic impressions provide them with detailed knowledge of Imperial defensive systems, administrative procedures, and individual psychological profiles that prove invaluable for planning infiltration and subversion operations. The mental domination capabilities possessed by experienced Magus leaders allow them to exert direct control over human minds, implanting suggestions and modifying memories in ways that create devoted followers without requiring genetic modification or extended indoctrination processes. Their psychic influence operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, creating emotional attachments and ideological commitments that victims experience as natural developments rather than external manipulation. This ability proves particularly effective when targeting individuals in positions of authority, as controlled officials can implement policy changes and resource allocations that benefit cult operations, while believing themselves to be acting according to their own judgment and values. The strategic planning capabilities of Magus-level hybrids encompass both short-term tactical operations and long-term infiltration campaigns spanning multiple decades, their enhanced cognitive abilities allowing them to coordinate complex multi-phase operations while adapting to changing circumstances and unexpected complications. They maintain detailed mental models of entire planetary populations, tracking individual careers, family relationships, and psychological profiles across thousands of potential targets, while identifying optimal opportunities for recruitment, infiltration, and elimination. Their alien perspective on human behavior patterns allows them to predict individual and collective responses to various stimuli with remarkable accuracy. Magus leaders serving in legitimate Imperial positions often hold roles as planetary governors, military commanders, or industrial magnates, using their official authority to protect cult operations while advancing alien objectives through apparently normal administrative decisions. Their psychic abilities allow them to manipulate subordinates and colleagues without detection, creating networks of unwitting collaborators who advance cult interests while believing themselves to be serving Imperial goals. Their modifications to official policies and procedures typically appear as reasonable administrative improvements rather than obvious subversion, making their influence virtually impossible to detect through conventional security measures. The recruitment and indoctrination of human converts represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of cult operations, demonstrating the psychological manipulation techniques that allow alien influences to spread beyond genetic bloodlines into the broader human population. These uninfected humans become devoted cult members through carefully orchestrated processes that exploit their psychological vulnerabilities while gradually reshaping their worldview to align with cult objectives. The conversion process typically spans months or years, beginning with practical assistance and social inclusion before progressing to ideological indoctrination and complete psychological conditioning. Brood brothers represent the most common category of human converts, typically individuals from lower social classes who have been recruited through promises of improved living conditions, protection from criminal organizations, and opportunities for social advancement within cult communities. Their unmodified genetics allow them to pass standard Imperial screening procedures, while their genuine conviction makes them effective advocates for cult ideals within their original social circles. Many Brood brothers serve in Imperial Guard regiments or planetary defense forces, providing cult leadership with detailed intelligence about military capabilities while positioning themselves to sabotage defensive operations during critical moments. The psychological conditioning of Brood brothers relies heavily on their integration into supportive community structures that provide practical benefits unavailable through legitimate Imperial institutions. Cult communities offer job placement assistance, medical care, educational opportunities, and protection services that address immediate needs while creating dependency relationships that discourage defection. The gradual introduction of cult theological concepts occurs within contexts of practical problem-solving and community support, making alien ideas appear as natural extensions of beneficial social programs rather than obvious indoctrination. Sanctus assassins represent the elite tier of human converts, individuals selected for their exceptional physical capabilities, psychological stability, and demonstrated loyalty to cult objectives. These agents undergo intensive training programs that combine traditional Imperial assassination techniques with alien-influenced combat methods, creating killers whose capabilities approach those of Imperial assassins while remaining completely undetectable through conventional screening procedures. Their human genetics and carefully constructed background identities allow them to infiltrate high-security Imperial installations and eliminate specific targets without arousing suspicion about cult involvement. The training regimens imposed on Sanctus assassins incorporate physical conditioning techniques that push human capabilities to their absolute limits, while psychological conditioning eliminates moral restraints and emotional responses that might interfere with mission completion. Their combat training emphasizes stealth, precision, and adaptability, with particular focus on techniques for eliminating targets protected by advanced security systems and bodyguard details. Their knowledge of Imperial security procedures and individual protection protocols allows them to identify vulnerabilities that conventional assassins might overlook. Sanctus operatives typically maintain legitimate identities within Imperial society for years or decades before receiving activation orders, during which time they establish careers, social relationships, and community connections that provide perfect camouflage for their true nature. Their assignments often involve the elimination of Imperial officials who pose threats to cult operations, the sabotage of critical infrastructure during uprising operations, or the gathering of intelligence about defensive preparations and strategic planning. Their ability to operate independently for extended periods while maintaining absolute loyalty to cult objectives makes them invaluable assets for long-term infiltration campaigns. The indoctrinated masses represent the broadest category of cult membership, encompassing entire communities that have been gradually converted through systematic exposure to cult ideology and psychological manipulation. These populations typically develop within isolated industrial settlements, mining colonies, or lower hive districts where Imperial oversight remains minimal and cult agents can operate with relative freedom. The conversion of entire communities occurs through the gradual replacement of local leadership with cult agents, the modification of educational and religious institutions to promote cult ideals, and the systematic elimination of individuals who demonstrate resistance to indoctrination. The mass indoctrination process exploits existing social tensions and economic hardships to create receptive audiences for cult messaging, with hybrid agents identifying specific grievances and concerns that can be addressed through cult community programs. The introduction of cult ideology occurs gradually through the modification of existing religious and philosophical frameworks, with familiar concepts being reinterpreted to support alien objectives while maintaining sufficient continuity to avoid triggering resistance responses. The process typically requires multiple generations to achieve complete conversion, with each generation becoming more thoroughly conditioned than their predecessors. The psychological conditioning of indoctrinated populations creates communities that genuinely believe their devotion to alien masters represents the highest form of human spiritual development, with members experiencing sincere religious fulfillment through their participation in cult activities. Their conversion appears authentic because it is authentic from their subjective perspective, making them extraordinarily effective advocates for cult expansion while remaining completely unaware of the alien manipulation that shaped their beliefs. These communities serve as recruitment centers, safe havens, and resource bases for cult operations, while maintaining the appearance of loyal Imperial settlements. The arsenal employed by Genestealer cults reflects their dual nature as both industrial insurgents and alien infiltrators, combining improvised weapons crafted from readily available materials with sophisticated military equipment acquired through decades of patient infiltration. Unlike conventional rebel movements that rely primarily on captured Imperial armaments, cult forces demonstrate remarkable ingenuity in converting civilian industrial equipment into devastating instruments of warfare. This approach serves multiple strategic purposes, allowing cult cells to arm themselves without triggering Imperial supply monitoring systems, while maintaining operational security through the use of weapons that appear entirely mundane to casual observation. Mining lasers represent the most iconic weapon within cult arsenals, their industrial origins providing perfect camouflage for military applications, while delivering firepower comparable to Imperial Guard lascannons. These devices originally served to cut through solid rock and metal ore in deep mining operations, their focused energy beams capable of boring precise holes through several meters of reinforced stone. Cult weaponsmiths modify these tools by adjusting their focusing arrays and power regulators, creating portable weapons that can punch through ceramite armor plating with devastating efficiency. The modifications typically involve replacing the standard power cells with higher capacity units salvaged from construction equipment, while recalibrating the beam intensity controls to allow rapid switching between cutting and combat settings. The effectiveness of modified mining lasers in combat situations stems from their ability to deliver sustained energy output that exceeds most personal weapons available to Imperial forces. Their industrial-grade focusing lenses concentrate energy beams to pinpoint accuracy, allowing skilled operators to target specific weak points in enemy armor or disable critical equipment components with surgical precision. The weapons retain their original safety systems and operational controls, making them familiar tools for cult members with mining backgrounds, while remaining sufficiently complex to discourage casual use by captured enemies. Heavy stubbers form the backbone of cult heavy weapons capabilities, their robust construction and simple maintenance requirements making them ideal for prolonged insurgency operations in hostile environments. These weapons originally serve as defensive armaments for industrial installations and cargo hauling operations, their solid projectile ammunition proving effective against both personnel and light vehicle targets. Cult armament specialists modify standard heavy stubber configurations by installing extended ammunition feeds, reinforced barrel assemblies, and improved cooling systems that allow sustained fire rates far exceeding manufacturer specifications. The ammunition employed by cult heavy stubber teams often incorporates specialized projectiles crafted in clandestine workshops using materials readily available within industrial facilities. Armor-piercing rounds feature hardened steel cores surrounded by depleted uranium jackets salvaged from reactor shielding components, while explosive rounds contain chemical charges derived from mining demolition supplies. Incendiary ammunition incorporates promethium-based compounds that create persistent fires capable of denying area access to enemy forces, while tracer rounds provide targeting assistance during night operations and low-visibility combat situations. Demolition charges represent perhaps the most devastating weapons within cult arsenals, their explosive potential capable of collapsing entire Hive city sections or destroying critical infrastructure targets with carefully coordinated detonations. These devices originate as standard mining explosives designed to break up large rock formations and clear underground passages, their chemical compositions optimized for controlled demolition work rather than anti-personnel applications. Cult explosive specialists modify these charges by combining multiple units into larger devices, installing remote detonation systems, and incorporating shrapnel materials that transform mining tools into devastating anti-personnel weapons. The tactical deployment of demolition charges requires extensive knowledge of structural engineering and explosive chemistry, skills that many cult members possess through their legitimate employment in construction and mining operations. Cult sabotage teams identify critical structural weak points within target buildings, calculating precise charge placement and timing sequences that maximize damage while minimizing the risk of premature detonation. Their intimate knowledge of Hive city infrastructure allows them to position explosives in locations that amplify blast effects through sympathetic structural failures, bringing down massive buildings using relatively modest amounts of explosive material. The acquisition of military-grade weapons through infiltration represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of cult armament programs, demonstrating the long-term planning capabilities and institutional penetration achieved by mature cult organizations. Rather than relying on direct theft or black market purchases that might attract Imperial attention, cult agents systematically infiltrate Imperial Guard supply chains and armament production facilities over periods spanning decades. Their patient approach allows them to divert weapons and equipment in small quantities that remain below detection thresholds, while gradually building substantial arsenals capable of equipping entire cult armies. Imperial Guard infiltration operations typically begin with cult agents seeking employment within military logistics organizations, their enhanced physical capabilities and demonstrated reliability making them valuable personnel for dangerous loading and transport duties. Over time, these agents advance to supervisory positions where they can influence inventory procedures and shipping manifests, creating systematic discrepancies that allow weapons to be diverted without triggering security investigations. The process requires careful coordination between multiple cult cells to ensure diverted equipment reaches secure storage locations without creating traceable patterns that might expose the infiltration network. Autogun production facilities represent particularly valuable targets for cult infiltration efforts, as these weapons serve as standard armaments for Imperial Guard forces while remaining simple enough for cult weaponsmiths to maintain and modify. Cult agents embedded within manufacturing operations gradually divert completed weapons during quality control procedures, replacing functional units with defective models that fail inspection processes while the diverted weapons enter cult distribution networks. The substitution process requires detailed knowledge of Imperial quality standards and inspection procedures, ensuring that defective replacements exhibit flaws that appear to result from normal manufacturing variations rather than deliberate sabotage. Flamer weapons acquired through military infiltration provide cult forces with devastating close combat capabilities, particularly suited for urban warfare operations and tunnel fighting scenarios common in Hive city environments. These weapons prove especially effective against Imperial forces equipped with standard flak armor, as their promethium-based fuel creates persistent fires that penetrate protective equipment while denying area access to enemy reinforcements. Cult flame weapons specialists modify standard Imperial designs by installing larger fuel tanks and improved ignition systems that increase operational range while maintaining the reliability necessary for extended combat operations. The maintenance and modification of stolen Imperial equipment requires extensive technical knowledge and specialized tools that cult organizations acquire through their infiltration of mechanized units and technical support facilities. Cult tech adepts, typically hybrid agents with enhanced cognitive capabilities, master the repair procedures and modification techniques necessary to keep captured weapons operational despite lacking access to official Imperial supply chains. Their workshops, hidden within abandoned industrial facilities and forgotten maintenance tunnels, contain sophisticated equipment capable of manufacturing replacement parts and ammunition using materials scavenged from legitimate industrial operations. Goliath trucks serve as the primary combat vehicles for most Genestealer Cult forces, their origins as civilian cargo haulers providing perfect camouflage for military applications, while their robust construction proves capable of mounting heavy weapons and armor plating. These vehicles originally transport mining equipment and industrial supplies through dangerous underground passages, their reinforced chassis and powerful engines designed to operate reliably in harsh environmental conditions. Cult vehicle specialists modify standard Goliath configurations by installing additional armor plating, mounting weapon systems, and upgrading engine components to improve combat performance while maintaining the appearance of legitimate industrial vehicles. The armor modifications applied to Goliath trucks typically involve welding additional steel plating over critical components, installing reinforced windscreens capable of stopping small arms fire, and adding protective skirts around wheel assemblies to prevent immobilization through targeted attacks. The placement of armor additions requires careful consideration of weight distribution and vehicle handling characteristics, as excessive modifications can compromise mobility and mechanical reliability. Cult vehicle crews often incorporate scavenged materials from destroyed Imperial vehicles, creating composite armor arrays that provide enhanced protection while utilizing readily available materials. Weapon mounting systems installed on modified Goliath trucks range from simple pintle mounts for heavy stubbers to sophisticated turret assemblies capable of housing mining lasers or captured Imperial heavy weapons. The electrical systems necessary to power energy weapons require significant modifications to standard vehicle configurations, often involving the installation of additional generators and power distribution networks that can support sustained combat operations. Cult technical specialists demonstrate remarkable ingenuity in integrating disparate systems, creating functional combat vehicles from civilian platforms using improvised components and scavenged materials. Achilles Ridgerunners represent the elite reconnaissance and fast attack vehicles within Cult motor pools, their sophisticated sensor systems and high-speed capabilities making them ideal platforms for scouting operations and hit-and-run attacks against isolated Imperial positions. These vehicles originally serve as survey platforms for mining operations, their advanced terrain mapping equipment and communication systems designed to operate in remote locations far from Imperial infrastructure. Cult forces modify these vehicles by upgrading their weapon systems, improving their armor protection, and enhancing their stealth capabilities to create highly effective reconnaissance platforms. The sensor systems aboard Achilles Ridgerunners provide Cult forces with intelligence-gathering capabilities that rival those of Imperial reconnaissance units. Their ground-penetrating radar and thermal imaging equipment capable of detecting enemy positions through solid barriers and adverse weather conditions. Cult operators modify these systems to enhance their military applications, installing target designation equipment and communications relays that allow real-time coordination with other Cult forces. The vehicle's high-speed capabilities and advanced suspension systems make them ideal platforms for rapid deployment and extraction operations in hostile territory. The weapon systems mounted on Achilles Ridgerunners typically emphasize long-range precision fire over raw destructive power, their role as reconnaissance platforms requiring weapons capable of engaging targets at extended distances while maintaining vehicle concealment. Heavy mining lasers serve as primary armaments, their energy-based ammunition eliminating supply concerns while providing devastating anti-armor capabilities. Secondary weapon systems often include heavy stubbers for anti-personnel work and smoke launchers for concealment during withdrawal operations. Repurposed mining equipment forms a significant portion of Cult vehicle inventories, their industrial origins providing excellent camouflage, while their heavy construction proves adaptable to military applications. Excavation vehicles equipped with reinforced digging arms become devastating siege engines capable of breaching fortified positions, while ore haulers serve as improvised armored personnel carriers for transporting Cult forces through dangerous combat zones. The modification process typically involves installing additional armor plating, mounting weapon systems, and upgrading engine components to improve combat performance. The psychological impact of repurposed industrial vehicles on Imperial forces proves as significant as their tactical capabilities, as their civilian appearance creates confusion and hesitation among enemy troops trained to identify conventional military threats. Imperial Guard units expecting to face standard rebel vehicles find themselves confronting mining equipment and construction machinery that appears entirely benign until weapons systems become active. This confusion creates tactical advantages for cult forces, allowing them to achieve surprise attacks and close-range engagements that might otherwise prove impossible against alert enemy forces. Aberrants serve as the shock troops of Genestealer Cult forces, their massive physical bulk and devastating close combat capabilities making them ideal for breakthrough operations and defensive positions where their enhanced durability proves most valuable. These fourth-generation hybrids retain sufficient human intelligence to follow complex tactical instructions, while possessing alien-enhanced physiology that grants them strength levels approaching those of Space Marine Terminators. Their natural resistance to pain and enhanced healing capabilities allow them to absorb tremendous amounts of damage while continuing to fight, making them extraordinarily dangerous opponents in close-quarters combat situations. The physical modifications present in aberrant physiology create beings whose combat capabilities exceed those of most Imperial forces, their enlarged muscle mass and reinforced skeletal structure providing strength sufficient to crush ceramite armor with their bare hands. Their modified cardiovascular systems support sustained physical exertion far beyond human norms, while their enhanced metabolisms allow rapid healing of wounds that would permanently disable ordinary humans. The psychological conditioning that accompanies their physical transformation eliminates fear responses and self-preservation instincts, creating warriors who advance into enemy fire without hesitation or tactical consideration. Combat deployment of aberrant units typically involves their use as assault troops in urban warfare scenarios, where their enhanced strength proves most advantageous for breaking through fortified positions and engaging enemy forces in confined spaces. Their natural resistance to small arms fire allows them to advance through defensive positions that would stop conventional infantry, while their devastating close combat capabilities make them exceptionally effective at clearing enemy strongpoints and eliminating isolated resistance pockets. Their psychological impact on enemy morale often proves as significant as their tactical effectiveness, as Imperial troops struggle to maintain discipline when confronting obviously inhuman opponents. The equipment employed by aberrant units reflects their role as close assault specialists, with weapons and gear selected to maximize their effectiveness in melee combat while accommodating their enlarged physiology and enhanced strength. Power hammers and industrial mauls serve as primary weapons, their massive weight requiring strength levels that only aberrants can provide while delivering devastating impacts capable of crushing vehicle armor and fortified positions. Heavy mining equipment adapted for combat use provides additional options, with rock drills and cutting tools serving as improvised weapons that exploit aberrant strength advantages. Purestrain Genestealers represent the apex predators within cult military forces, their alien biology granting them combat capabilities that exceed those of most Imperial elite units, while their perfect stealth abilities make them ideal for infiltration and assassination missions. These creatures retain the full range of Genestealer capabilities, including enhanced strength, speed, and agility combined with natural armor protection and devastating claw attacks that can penetrate even Terminator armor. Their alien intelligence allows them to coordinate complex tactical operations, while their psychic connections to the Broodmind network provide real-time battlefield intelligence and strategic coordination. The deployment of Purestrain Genestealers requires careful consideration of tactical objectives and operational security, as their obviously alien appearance makes them unsuitable for operations requiring stealth among human populations. Their combat effectiveness proves most valuable in assault operations, where their speed and agility allow them to close with enemy positions before defensive fire can achieve significant effect. Their natural stealth capabilities make them exceptionally effective at infiltrating enemy installations through ventilation systems, maintenance tunnels, and other access routes that conventional forces cannot utilize. The psychological impact of Purestrain Genestealer deployment on Imperial forces cannot be overstated, as their alien appearance and devastating combat capabilities create terror effects that often prove more significant than their actual tactical contributions. Imperial Guard units facing Genestealer attacks frequently suffer complete morale collapse as soldiers witness their comrades torn apart by creatures that seem to ignore conventional weapons fire while moving with inhuman speed and agility. The terror effects extend beyond immediate combat situations, as rumors of Genestealer presence can demoralize entire Imperial forces and create reluctance to engage in close-quarters combat operations where these creatures prove most dangerous. The patient infiltration of planetary governments represents perhaps the most insidious aspect of Genestealer cult operations, as hybrid agents systematically penetrate administrative structures over periods spanning multiple generations. Unlike the crude subversion attempts of chaos cultists or the obvious corruption of alien collaborators, Genestealer infiltration occurs through the gradual placement of exceptional individuals who demonstrate unwavering loyalty to Imperial ideals while secretly advancing alien objectives through their official duties. The process begins with first and second generation hybrids seeking entry-level positions within planetary administrative departments. Their enhanced cognitive abilities and genuine dedication to their assigned tasks making them valuable employees who advance rapidly through bureaucratic hierarchies. The infiltration process exploits fundamental weaknesses in Imperial administrative systems, particularly the tendency of overworked department heads to rely heavily on competent subordinates who demonstrate initiative and reliability. Hybrid agents deliberately seek positions in departments responsible for population census data, resource allocation records, and infrastructure maintenance schedules, roles that provide access to critical information while remaining below the attention threshold of senior administrators. Their enhanced mental capabilities allow them to process vast amounts of bureaucratic data while identifying patterns and connections that escape normal human analysis, creating comprehensive intelligence profiles of planetary defensive capabilities and strategic vulnerabilities. Third-generation hybrids operating within planetary governments often achieve positions of significant authority through decades of exemplary service. Their refined human appearance and exceptional administrative skills making them natural candidates for promotion to senior advisory roles. These individuals maintain detailed mental records of governmental decision-making processes, budget allocations, and strategic planning discussions, while using their positions to influence policy decisions in subtle ways that benefit cult operations. Their modifications to official procedures typically appear as efficiency improvements or security enhancements rather than obvious subversion, making their influence virtually impossible to detect through conventional oversight mechanisms. The corruption of record-keeping systems represents one of the most devastating long-term effects of governmental infiltration, as hybrid administrators gradually modify population databases, tax records, and identity documentation to create false identities and conceal cult activities. These alterations occur incrementally over years or decades, with small changes to individual records accumulating into systematic gaps in Imperial surveillance capabilities. Birth certificates for hybrid offspring receive subtle modifications that conceal genetic anomalies, while death certificates for disappeared individuals create false documentation that prevents investigations into cult recruitment activities. Hybrid agents embedded within planetary defense coordination offices provide cult leadership with detailed intelligence about Imperial military capabilities, deployment patterns, and strategic planning procedures. These positions grant access to classified information about fortress locations, ammunition stockpiles, and communication protocols that prove invaluable for planning uprising operations and coordinating with approaching Tyranid forces. The intelligence gathering occurs through normal administrative duties, as hybrid agents process routine reports and maintain official databases while mentally cataloging information relevant to cult objectives. The infiltration of Adeptus Arbites precincts presents unique challenges due to the rigorous screening procedures and psychological conditioning imposed on law enforcement personnel. Yet patient cult agents have successfully penetrated local enforcement agencies through through demonstrated excellence in dangerous assignments and unwavering commitment to Imperial law. The process typically begins with hybrid agents seeking employment as civilian support staff within Arbites facilities, positions that provide access to case files, evidence storage areas, and communication systems while remaining below the security threshold that triggers intensive background investigations. Hybrid agents within Arbites organizations demonstrate exceptional performance in criminal investigation procedures, their enhanced analytical capabilities allowing them to solve cases that confound normal human investigators, while their psychological conditioning ensures absolute adherence to official procedures and regulations. Their success rates in apprehending criminals and resolving complex cases create reputations for competence and dedication that facilitate advancement to positions of greater authority and access. The intelligence they gather about Imperial law enforcement capabilities, investigation procedures, and surveillance systems provides cult leadership with detailed knowledge of security vulnerabilities that can be exploited during subversion operations. The corruption of evidence storage facilities by embedded Arbites agents creates opportunities for cult forces to acquire advanced weapons and surveillance equipment, while eliminating physical evidence that might expose cult activities to Imperial investigation. These operations require careful timing and coordination to ensure that missing items remain undetected for extended periods, often involving the substitution of evidence with carefully crafted replicas that pass casual inspection while concealing the theft of valuable materials. The process exploits bureaucratic inefficiencies and inadequate inventory procedures that characterize many Arbites precincts, particularly those operating in remote locations or understaffed facilities. Imperial Guard Regiment Infiltration represents the most militarily significant aspect of cult penetration efforts, as embedded agents provide detailed intelligence about Imperial military capabilities while positioning themselves to sabotage defensive operations during crucial moments. The infiltration process typically begins during recruitment drives, when cult agents present themselves as loyal Imperial citizens seeking to serve the Emperor through military service. Their enhanced physical capabilities and psychological conditioning make them exceptional soldiers who advance rapidly through enlisted ranks, often achieving non-commissioned officer positions that grant access to tactical planning and operational intelligence. Hybrid soldiers embedded within Imperial Guard units demonstrate combat performance that consistently exceeds normal human capabilities, their enhanced strength, reflexes, and endurance making them valuable assets during training exercises and combat operations. Their natural resistance to battlefield stress and enhanced pain tolerance allow them to maintain effectiveness in situations that would incapacitate ordinary soldiers, creating reputations for reliability and courage that facilitate advancement to positions of greater responsibility. Their genuine concern for the welfare of human comrades makes them popular leaders who inspire loyalty and trust among their subordinates. The intelligence-gathering capabilities of embedded Imperial Guard agents provide cult leadership with comprehensive information about Imperial military doctrine, equipment specifications, and tactical procedures that prove invaluable for planning counter-operations during eventual uprising scenarios. These agents maintain detailed mental records of unit deployment patterns, communication protocols, and logistical procedures, while identifying specific vulnerabilities in Imperial defensive systems. Their knowledge of individual officer personalities and decision-making patterns allows cult strategists to predict Imperial responses to various tactical situations with remarkable accuracy. Sabotage operations conducted by embedded Imperial Guard agents typically focus on critical moments during combat operations when equipment failures or communication breakdowns can create decisive advantages for cult forces. These activities require precise timing and careful coordination to ensure that sabotage appears to result from equipment malfunctions or enemy action rather than internal betrayal. The psychological conditioning of hybrid agents allows them to carry out these operations while maintaining genuine emotional attachments to their human comrades, creating internal conflicts that they resolve through elaborate rationalization processes. Trade guild infiltration provides cult organizations with access to commercial networks and resource distribution systems that span entire planetary regions, creating opportunities for large-scale smuggling operations and economic manipulation campaigns. The process typically begins with hybrid agents seeking employment within shipping companies, warehouse operations, and cargo handling facilities, where their enhanced physical capabilities make them valuable workers in dangerous loading and transport duties. Their demonstrated reliability and exceptional performance in hazardous assignments create advancement opportunities that place them in supervisory positions where they can influence shipping schedules and cargo manifests. The economic intelligence gathered through trade guild infiltration provides cult leadership with detailed knowledge of planetary resource flows, commercial relationships, and supply chain vulnerabilities that can be exploited for both immediate tactical advantage and long-term strategic planning. Hybrid agents monitor shipments of military equipment, industrial materials, and food supplies, while identifying opportunities to divert resources toward cult operations without triggering security investigations. Their modifications to shipping documentation and inventory records typically appear as routine administrative corrections rather than deliberate falsification. Smuggling operations coordinated through infiltrated trade guilds allow cult organizations to transport weapons, equipment, and personnel across planetary regions, while avoiding Imperial security checkpoints and surveillance systems. These activities exploit legitimate commercial traffic patterns to conceal illegal cargo within routine shipments, using modified containers and false documentation to create transportation networks that remain invisible to Imperial authorities. The process requires detailed knowledge of inspection procedures and security protocols, information that embedded agents gather through their legitimate employment within commercial organizations. Mining consortium infiltration represents one of the most strategically significant aspects of cult penetration efforts, as these organizations control access to underground facilities that provide ideal locations for cult gathering spaces and weapons storage facilities. The process typically begins with hybrid agents seeking employment in dangerous mining operations, where their enhanced physical capabilities and resistance to hazardous environmental conditions make them exceptionally valuable workers. Their ability to operate safely in toxic atmospheres and extreme temperature conditions allows them to work in areas that would quickly kill normal humans, creating opportunities for advancement to supervisory positions. The underground facilities controlled by infiltrated mining operations provide cult organizations with secure locations for establishing hidden bases and weapons manufacturing facilities that remain completely invisible to Imperial surface surveillance systems. These installations typically occupy abandoned mine shafts, forgotten maintenance tunnels, and decommissioned processing facilities, where cult activities can proceed without risk of accidental discovery by Imperial authorities. The extensive tunnel networks that connect mining installations create transportation routes that allow cult forces to move personnel and equipment across large areas without surface exposure. Industrial complex infiltration focuses on manufacturing facilities and processing plants that provide access to materials and equipment necessary for cult weapons production and infrastructure development. Hybrid agents embedded within these facilities gradually divert raw materials, finished components, and manufacturing equipment toward cult operations, while maintaining production schedules that prevent detection through routine oversight procedures. Their enhanced cognitive abilities allow them to identify opportunities for resource diversion that remain below detection thresholds, while accumulating significant quantities of valuable materials over extended periods. The technical knowledge acquired through industrial infiltration enables cult organizations to establish sophisticated manufacturing capabilities that rival those of legitimate Imperial facilities, creating weapons and equipment that match or exceed Imperial Guard standard issue while utilizing readily available materials and improvised production techniques. Hybrid technical specialists master complex manufacturing procedures and quality control processes, allowing them to produce reliable equipment despite operating in clandestine facilities with limited resources and improvised tooling systems. Information network establishment represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of cult infiltration operations, creating communication systems that span entire planetary regions while remaining completely invisible to Imperial monitoring and surveillance efforts. The process typically begins with hybrid agents seeking employment within planetary communication services, transportation coordination centers, and data processing facilities, where they can access existing information infrastructure while establishing additional communication channels for cult use. Hybrid agents embedded within communication facilities gradually modify routing protocols, establish unauthorized relay stations, and create backup communication channels that allow cult forces to coordinate activities across multiple regions without relying on Imperial infrastructure that might be monitored or disrupted during security operations. These modifications typically appear as routine maintenance procedures or efficiency improvements rather than obvious subversion, making them virtually impossible to detect through conventional security audits. The establishment of cult-controlled transportation networks exploits existing commercial shipping routes and public transit systems to create movement capabilities that allow personnel and equipment to traverse planetary regions without triggering Imperial security protocols. Hybrid agents embedded within transportation organizations modify scheduling systems, cargo manifests, and passenger records to create transportation opportunities that remain invisible to Imperial oversight while providing cult forces with rapid deployment capabilities across strategic locations. Logistics role infiltration provides cult organizations with detailed knowledge of Imperial supply chains and resource distribution systems, while creating opportunities to disrupt enemy operations through targeted sabotage and resource diversion. Hybrid agents embedded within logistics operations monitor equipment maintenance schedules, ammunition distribution patterns, and fuel supply procedures while identifying vulnerabilities that can be exploited during uprising operations. Their modifications to supply routing and inventory management systems create systematic weaknesses that compound over time, gradually degrading Imperial defensive capabilities through accumulated inefficiencies and resource shortages. The patient gathering of intelligence on planetary defenses occurs through the systematic placement of hybrid agents within military installations, communication centers, and strategic planning facilities, where they can access classified information about Imperial defensive capabilities and tactical procedures. This intelligence gathering process spans multiple decades, with each generation of hybrid agents building upon information gathered by their predecessors, while expanding the scope and depth of cult knowledge about Imperial military systems. Troop movement intelligence gathered through embedded agents provides cult leadership with detailed knowledge of Imperial deployment patterns, unit rotation schedules, and reinforcement procedures that allow accurate prediction of Imperial responses to various tactical scenarios. This information enables cult forces to time their operations for maximum effectiveness while avoiding confrontations with superior Imperial forces during vulnerable periods. The intelligence gathering process exploits routine administrative duties and normal military communications to avoid triggering security protocols that might expose cult infiltration efforts. Strategic asset identification represents the culmination of long-term intelligence gathering operations, creating comprehensive databases of Imperial defensive installations, resource stockpiles, and critical infrastructure that must be neutralized or captured during uprising operations. Hybrid agents embedded within strategic planning organizations provide detailed information about fortress locations, ammunition depots, and communication centers, while identifying specific vulnerabilities that can be exploited through coordinated assault operations. This intelligence proves invaluable for coordinating cult uprising activities with approaching tyrannid forces, ensuring that planetary defenses suffer maximum disruption during the crucial initial phases of invasion operations. The culmination of decades of patient infiltration arrives with the day of ascension, when Genestealer cults across an entire world simultaneously cast aside their masks of loyalty and reveal their true alien nature through coordinated acts of sabotage, betrayal, and open warfare. This moment represents the most dangerous phase of tyrannid advance operations, as the carefully constructed web of infiltration transforms into a devastating military campaign designed to cripple planetary defenses before the arrival of the Hive fleet. The uprising follows a precise four-phase progression that maximizes chaos and confusion among Imperial forces while establishing cult control over critical infrastructure and strategic positions. The first phase begins with systematic infrastructure sabotage, as embedded cult agents simultaneously strike against power generation facilities, communication networks, and transportation hubs across the planet. These initial attacks occur during carefully selected timeframes when Imperial defensive responses will be most severely hampered, typically during shift changes at critical facilities or during periods of reduced manning due to ceremonial observances or administrative reorganization. The sabotage operations exploit the intimate knowledge of planetary infrastructure that cult agents have accumulated through decades of legitimate employment within essential services, allowing them to target specific vulnerabilities that create cascading failures throughout interconnected systems. Power grid attacks focus on primary generation stations and distribution nodes, with cult saboteurs using their detailed knowledge of electrical systems to create failures that appear to result from equipment malfunctions rather than deliberate sabotage. The timing of these attacks creates maximum disruption to Imperial defensive coordination, as communication systems, sensor networks, and automated defense installations lose power during the crucial initial hours when rapid response capabilities prove most essential. Cult technical specialists demonstrate remarkable sophistication in their sabotage techniques, often triggering sympathetic failures that bring down entire regional power networks through the destruction of single critical components. The destruction of communication infrastructure represents perhaps the most strategically significant aspect of initial sabotage operations, as isolated Imperial forces cannot coordinate defensive responses or request reinforcement from neighboring regions. Cult agents embedded within communication services simultaneously destroy relay stations, sever fiber optic cables, and disable satellite uplink facilities using precisely timed explosions that eliminate redundant communication pathways within minutes of each other. The attacks exploit detailed knowledge of communication network topology and backup systems, ensuring that Imperial forces cannot restore communication capabilities through alternate routing or emergency procedures. Transportation network disruption follows immediately after communication failures, with cult saboteurs destroying critical bridges, blocking tunnel systems, and disabling spaceport facilities to prevent Imperial forces from repositioning to counter emerging threats. These attacks often involve the use of massive demolition charges placed at structural weak points identified through years of patient surveillance, creating destruction that requires weeks or months of repair work to restore functionality. The simultaneous nature of these attacks prevents Imperial engineers from concentrating repair efforts on the most critical facilities, as damage assessment and resource allocation become impossible without functional communication systems. The second phase involves coordinated strikes against military installations and Imperial Guard facilities, as cult forces emerge from their hidden positions to assault isolated strongpoints and eliminate key defensive assets before Imperial commanders can organize coherent resistance. These attacks exploit detailed intelligence gathered by embedded agents over decades of infiltration, targeting specific vulnerabilities in fortress defenses and exploiting knowledge of garrison routines and security procedures. The assault forces typically consist of heavily armed cult members supported by repurposed industrial vehicles and improvised weapon systems. Their intimate knowledge of target facilities, allowing them to bypass defensive positions and strike directly at critical command and control centers. Ammunition depot seizures represent priority objectives during this phase, as cult forces seek to capture Imperial military supplies while denying them to defending forces. These operations often involve simultaneous attacks on multiple storage facilities, with cult assault teams using detailed facility plans provided by embedded agents to locate and secure specific types of ammunition and equipment. The captured supplies immediately enter cult distribution networks, providing rebel forces with military-grade weapons and equipment that dramatically enhance their combat capabilities during subsequent operations. Vehicle pool captures provide cult forces with much-needed transportation and heavy weapons platforms, as Imperial Guard motor pools contain armored vehicles and support equipment that far exceed the capabilities of improvised cult vehicles. These seizure operations typically occur during periods of reduced security, when embedded agents can disable alarm systems and eliminate guard details before assault teams arrive to claim valuable equipment. The captured vehicles receive rapid modifications to remove Imperial identification markings and install additional armor or weapon systems as battlefield conditions permit. Command center elimination represents the most critical objective during military installation attacks, as the destruction of Imperial command capabilities prevents coordinated defensive responses and creates confusion that cult forces exploit to maximum advantage. These operations typically involve small teams of elite cult operatives who use detailed facility knowledge to penetrate defensive perimeters and eliminate command staff before they can organize resistance or communicate with higher authorities. The psychological impact of these attacks often proves as significant as their tactical effects, as surviving Imperial forces lose confidence in their leadership and begin making individual decisions that reduce overall defensive effectiveness. The third phase witnesses the revelation of cult members within Imperial forces themselves, as embedded agents simultaneously abandon their human identities and turn their weapons against former comrades in acts of betrayal that shatter Imperial morale and create widespread paranoia among surviving defenders. These betrayals occur at precisely coordinated moments when their impact will prove most devastating to Imperial defensive capabilities, often during critical combat operations or emergency response procedures when unit cohesion becomes essential for survival. The psychological trauma inflicted by these betrayals often proves more damaging than the immediate tactical losses, as surviving Imperial personnel begin questioning the loyalty of all their comrades. Imperial Guard Regiment betrayals typically involve embedded cult agents revealing their true nature during combat operations, using their detailed knowledge of unit procedures and defensive positions to coordinate devastating attacks against their former comrades. These agents often hold non-commissioned officer positions that grant them access to communication equipment and tactical information, allowing them to provide real-time intelligence to attacking cult forces while sabotaging defensive preparations from within. The betrayals frequently occur during night operations or in confined spaces where Imperial forces cannot effectively respond to threats emerging from within their own ranks. Planetary Defense Force subversion creates widespread chaos throughout Imperial military hierarchy, as cult agents embedded within PDF commands simultaneously abandon their posts and begin coordinating with rebel forces to capture strategic installations and eliminate loyal personnel. These operations often involve the seizure of PDF armories and vehicle depots, providing cult forces with access to military equipment while eliminating organized resistance from local defense forces. The embedded agents use their knowledge of PDF deployment patterns and communication procedures to coordinate surprise attacks that eliminate entire units before they can mount effective resistance. Adeptus Arbites precinct betrayals prove particularly devastating to Imperial control, as the revelation of cult infiltration within law enforcement agencies creates widespread civilian panic, while eliminating the investigative capabilities necessary for identifying and countering cult operations. Embedded Arbites agents often use their positions to release imprisoned cult members while eliminating evidence of cult activities, creating chaos within the legal system that prevents effective counterintelligence operations. The betrayals typically involve the simultaneous seizure of multiple precinct facilities, with cult agents using their knowledge of security procedures to disable alarm systems and eliminate loyal personnel. Administrative betrayals within planetary government create systematic failures in Imperial bureaucratic systems, as embedded cult agents simultaneously abandon their positions while sabotaging critical records and procedures necessary for coordinating defensive responses. These operations often involve the destruction of population databases, resource allocation records, and emergency response protocols that Imperial authorities require for organizing resistance to cult uprising. The embedded agents use their detailed knowledge of administrative procedures to create maximum disruption while eliminating information that might be used to identify and counter cult infiltration networks. The fourth and final phase occurs when the Patriarch psychic call reaches maximum intensity, triggering simultaneous activation of cult cells across the entire planet while coordinating their operations with the approaching Tyrannid Hive fleet. This psychic signal serves as both a communication system and a psychological trigger, activating dormant conditioning within cult members while providing tactical coordination that allows dispersed cult forces to operate as a unified military organization. The intensity of the psychic call often affects even non-cult populations, creating widespread anxiety and psychological disturbance that further hampers Imperial defensive efforts. The Broodmind network reaches peak activity during this phase, with psychic connections between cult members becoming strong enough to coordinate complex multi-regional operations without relying on conventional communication systems. This psychic coordination allows cult forces to adapt their tactics in real time based on battlefield developments, creating a responsive command structure that proves extremely difficult for Imperial forces to counter or predict. The network also provides cult commanders with detailed intelligence about Imperial defensive positions and troop movements, allowing them to concentrate their forces against specific vulnerabilities while avoiding areas of strong Imperial resistance. Patriarch activation triggers the emergence of previously hidden Purestrain Genestealers and advanced hybrid forms that have remained concealed within cult populations until this crucial moment. These creatures represent the most dangerous combat assets within cult military forces, their alien biology granting them capabilities that exceed those of most Imperial elite units, while their perfect coordination through the Broodmind network makes them exceptionally effective at eliminating specific high-value targets. Their deployment typically focuses on the elimination of remaining Imperial command personnel and the capture of strategic installations that cult forces require for coordinating with approaching Tyrannid forces. Simultaneous cell activation creates a planet-wide uprising that overwhelms Imperial defensive capabilities through sheer scale and coordination, as cult forces emerge from hidden positions across multiple continents to seize control of critical infrastructure and eliminate organized resistance. The timing of these activations follows precise schedules that maximize confusion and prevent Imperial forces from concentrating their strength against any single threat, forcing defenders to respond to multiple simultaneous crises that exceed their organizational capabilities. The coordinated nature of the uprising creates a cascading failure of Imperial defensive systems, as each successful cult operation enables additional attacks against increasingly isolated Imperial positions. The psychological impact of simultaneous activation often proves as devastating as the tactical effects, as Imperial forces witness the sudden transformation of trusted colleagues, reliable workers, and loyal citizens into alien-influenced enemies who demonstrate intimate knowledge of Imperial defensive procedures and strategic vulnerabilities. This revelation creates widespread paranoia and suspicion among surviving Imperial personnel, as they begin questioning the loyalty of all remaining personnel, while struggling to maintain unit cohesion in the face of obvious infiltration. The psychological trauma often leads to breakdown of command authority and individual defensive efforts that prove ineffective against coordinated cult operations. Strategic objective seizure represents the culmination of the uprising phases, as cult forces move to capture spaceports, communication centers, and defensive installations that will be required for coordinating with approaching Tyranid forces. These operations typically involve the concentration of cult military assets against specific high-value targets, using the chaos created during earlier phases to overwhelm remaining Imperial defenses through coordinated assault operations. The capture of these facilities provides cult forces with the infrastructure necessary for guiding Tyranid landing operations, while denying Imperial forces the capability to request off-world reinforcement or evacuation. The coordination between cult uprising and Tyranid arrival represents the ultimate expression of the alien infiltration strategy, as decades of patient preparation culminate in the systematic dismantling of planetary defenses during the crucial hours before Hive fleet assault operations begin. The cult forces serve as advanced reconnaissance elements that provide Tyranid bioships with detailed intelligence about remaining Imperial defensive capabilities, while eliminating specific threats that might interfere with landing operations. The psychic coordination between cult and Tyranid forces allows real-time tactical adjustment based on battlefield conditions, creating a responsive invasion strategy that adapts to Imperial defensive responses. The Day of Ascension represents the moment when the true horror of Genestealer infiltration becomes apparent to Imperial authorities, as the revelation of widespread cult penetration demonstrates the complete failure of Imperial security systems to detect or counter the alien threat. The coordinated nature of the uprising reveals the sophisticated planning and organizational capabilities of cult leadership, while the extent of infiltration demonstrates that conventional Imperial defensive doctrine proves inadequate against enemies who emerge from within Imperial society itself. The psychological impact of these revelations often proves as devastating as the immediate military consequences, as surviving Imperial forces struggle to maintain morale and unit cohesion, while confronting the reality that their world has been systematically compromised by alien influences operating for decades or centuries without detection. The annals of Imperial history contain countless records of planetary uprisings, heretical revolts, and xenos incursions, yet few documents reveal the true scope of Genestealer cult infiltration across the galaxy. The secretive nature of these alien parasites ensures that most infestations remain undetected until the moment of their violent revelation, while those that are discovered often leave behind only fragmentary evidence of their origins and methods. The worlds that have suffered documented cult uprisings represent merely the visible portion of a much larger threat, as Imperial intelligence estimates suggest that hundreds of additional worlds harbor dormant cult populations awaiting the approach of their alien masters. The mining world of Gossar Quintus holds the grim distinction of hosting the first thoroughly documented Genestealer cult uprising in Imperial records, an event that provided Ordo Xenos investigators with their initial comprehensive understanding of cult infiltration methods and organizational structures. The world's extensive mining operations and isolated industrial settlements created ideal conditions for cult development, as the dangerous underground work environments naturally selected for workers with enhanced physical capabilities, while the remote locations allowed cult activities to proceed without Imperial oversight. The Gossar Quintus infestation began during the 39th millennium, when a derelict or hauler-designated Purity's Lament suffered catastrophic engine failure during routine cargo operations in the system's asteroid belt. Imperial Navy recovery teams discovered the vessel's cargo holds infested with dormant Genestealers that had apparently been hibernating within mineral deposits for an unknown period. The creatures awakened during salvage operations, killing most of the recovery team before several specimens escaped into the mining stations aboard commandeered shuttle craft. The surviving Navy personnel reported the incident as a standard Xenos encounter, failing to recognize the true nature of the threat they had unleashed upon the mining colonies. The initial Genestealer infiltration of Gossar Quintus proceeded according to the typical pattern of reproductive parasitism, with the surviving aliens targeting isolated mining crews working in the deepest excavation sites where their activities would remain unobserved by surface administrators. The enhanced physical capabilities of first-generation hybrids made them exceptionally valuable workers in the hazardous deep-core mining operations, while their psychological conditioning drove them to seek employment in the most dangerous and isolated work sites where cult activities could develop without interference. Over the following decades, hybrid bloodlines spread throughout the mining workforce as cult agents systematically infiltrated guild leadership positions and administrative roles within the planetary mining consortium. The consortium's decentralized management structure and focus on production quotas rather than personnel oversight created ideal conditions for cult expansion, as hybrid supervisors could manipulate work assignments and safety protocols to facilitate further infiltration while maintaining the appearance of normal industrial operations. The cult's growth accelerated dramatically when third-generation hybrids began achieving positions within the planetary administration, using their enhanced cognitive abilities and natural charisma to advance through bureaucratic hierarchies while systematically modifying population records and resource allocation procedures. The planetary governor, Lord Commander Vex Matthias, remained unaware of the infiltration despite receiving regular reports about increased productivity and reduced accident rates in the mining operations, interpreting these improvements as evidence of effective administrative policies rather than signs of alien influence. The Gossar Quintus uprising began without warning during the third watch shift of Tertius 15, when cult forces simultaneously seized control of 17 major mining installations across 4 continental regions. The coordinated nature of the attacks demonstrated sophisticated planning and communication capabilities that Imperial authorities had not anticipated, as cult forces demonstrated intimate knowledge of Imperial defensive positions and emergency response procedures. The initial assault phase focused on eliminating communication capabilities and isolating individual installations to prevent coordinated Imperial resistance. Cult forces demonstrated remarkable tactical sophistication during the uprising, using modified mining equipment as improvised weapons, while deploying captured Imperial Guard armaments with professional competence that suggested extensive military training. The revelation that many cult members held positions within the planetary defense forces explained their detailed knowledge of Imperial tactical doctrine and defensive capabilities, while their use of mining tunnels as concealed movement routes allowed them to appear at unexpected locations throughout the conflict. The most shocking aspect of the Gossar Quintus uprising was the revelation of widespread cult infiltration within the planetary administration itself, as numerous government officials abandoned their Imperial loyalties to coordinate with rebel forces. Administrative records discovered after the conflict revealed systematic modifications to population databases, resource allocation schedules, and security protocols that had been occurring for decades without detection by Imperial oversight agencies. The scope of the infiltration suggested that cult agents had achieved positions of significant authority throughout the planetary government structure. Imperial forces responding to the Gossar Quintus crisis encountered their first documented examples of fourth-generation Purestrains in combat, creatures whose alien appearance and devastating combat capabilities created widespread panic among Imperial Guard units trained for conventional warfare against human opponents. The Purestrains demonstrated tactical intelligence and coordination that exceeded expectations for mindless xenos predators, using complex ambush tactics and coordinated assault patterns that suggested sophisticated command and control capabilities. The suppression of the Gossar Quintus uprising required the deployment of 3 full Imperial Guard regiments and a company of Space Marines from the Iron Hands chapter, forces that eventually succeeded in eliminating organized cult resistance through systematic clearance operations that lasted nearly 2 years. The extensive underground tunnel networks created by decades of mining operations provided cult forces with defensive positions that proved extremely difficult to assault, requiring specialized equipment and tactics developed specifically for subterranean warfare. The aftermath of the Gossar Quintus conflict provided Imperial authorities with their first comprehensive intelligence about Genestealer Cult organization and capabilities, as captured documents and interrogated prisoners revealed details about cult hierarchy, recruitment methods, and strategic objectives that had previously remained unknown. The discovery of the Broodmind psychic network and its connection to approaching Tyrannid Hive fleets fundamentally altered Imperial understanding of the Genestealer threat, transforming it from a localized xenos incursion into a galaxy-spanning infiltration campaign. The approach of Hive Fleet Kraken during the late 41st millennium created unprecedented opportunities for Genestealer cult coordination across multiple star systems, as the massive Tyrannid swarm's psychic presence activated dormant cult populations throughout the eastern fringe and surrounding regions. The Hive Fleet's advanced scouts had seeded dozens of worlds with Genestealer organisms over previous centuries, creating a network of cult infestations that remained undetected until the approaching swarm triggered simultaneous uprisings across an entire sector of Imperial space. The coordination between Hive Fleet Kraken and established cult populations demonstrated the sophisticated nature of Tyrannid advance planning, as cult uprisings occurred with precise timing that maximized their impact on Imperial defensive preparations. Worlds that might have served as staging areas for Imperial counterattacks instead became battlegrounds where Imperial forces found themselves fighting simultaneous campaigns against external Tyrannid assault and internal cult rebellion. The dual nature of these conflicts stretched Imperial resources beyond their limits, while creating tactical situations that Imperial doctrine had never anticipated. The world of Ikar IV experienced one of the most devastating cult uprisings associated with Hive Fleet Kraken's advance, as embedded cult agents within the planetary defense forces provided Tyrannid bioships with detailed intelligence about Imperial fortification positions and defensive capabilities. The cult uprising began 3 days before the first Tyrannid organisms made planetfall, creating chaos within Imperial command structures that prevented effective coordination of defensive operations. The simultaneous nature of internal rebellion and external invasion created tactical challenges that overwhelmed Imperial commanders trained for conventional warfare scenarios. Cult forces on Ikar IV demonstrated remarkable tactical sophistication in their coordination with Tyrannid assault operations, using their detailed knowledge of Imperial defensive positions to guide bioship landing operations toward areas of weakest resistance, while simultaneously sabotaging communication networks that might have allowed Imperial forces to adapt their defensive strategies. The cult's intimate knowledge of planetary infrastructure allowed them to disable power generation facilities and transportation networks at precisely the moments when their disruption would prove most beneficial to the approaching Tyrannid forces. The Ultramarines chapter's response to the Ikar IV crisis revealed the extent of cult infiltration within Imperial Guard regiments assigned to planetary defense, as several units turned their weapons against their own comrades during critical moments of the campaign. The betrayals occurred during night operations and confused combat situations, where the identity of attackers remained unclear until too late, creating widespread paranoia among Imperial forces that further degraded their combat effectiveness. The psychological impact of these betrayals often proved more devastating than their immediate tactical consequences. The industrial world of Graia suffered a particularly insidious form of cult infiltration that exploited the planet's role as a major weapons manufacturing center for Imperial Guard forces throughout the segmentum. Cult agents embedded within the manufacturing facilities gradually introduced subtle defects into weapons and equipment destined for military units on worlds that intelligence indicated would face Tyrannid assault. The sabotage remained undetected for decades, as the defects were designed to manifest only under specific combat conditions that would occur during encounters with Tyrannid organisms. The Graia cult sabotage operations demonstrated remarkable sophistication in their understanding of Imperial military equipment and Tyrannid combat capabilities, as the introduced defects specifically targeted vulnerabilities that would prove most significant during anti-Tyrannid operations. Lasgun power cells received modifications that caused catastrophic failure when exposed to the specific electromagnetic frequencies generated by Tyrannid bioships, while vehicle engine components contained time-delayed degradation mechanisms that triggered during extended combat operations typical of Tyrannid siege warfare. The revelation of the Graia cult's activities occurred only after multiple Imperial Guard regiments reported unusually high equipment failure rates during encounters with Hive Fleet Kraken's advance elements, prompting Adeptus Mechanicus investigators to conduct comprehensive analysis of affected equipment. The discovery of systematic sabotage within Imperial weapons manufacturing created a crisis of confidence that extended far beyond the immediate tactical implications, as military commanders throughout the Imperium began questioning the reliability of their equipment and supply chains. The Vigilus campaign of the late 41st millennium showcased the devastating effectiveness of Genestealer Cult coordination during large-scale Imperial military operations, as multiple cult organizations across the strategically vital world simultaneously revealed themselves during the War of Beasts. The planet's importance as a nexus point for Imperial logistics and communication networks made it an ideal target for cult infiltration, while its massive population centers provided ample opportunities for cult expansion and recruitment activities. The Vigilus cult infestations demonstrated unprecedented levels of inter-cult coordination, as separate organizations that had developed independently over centuries began working together with remarkable efficiency once the approaching Tyrannid presence activated their dormant conditioning. The cult's ability to coordinate their activities across multiple Hive cities and industrial regions suggested sophisticated communication networks that had remained completely undetected by Imperial security services despite extensive surveillance operations. The Pauper Prince's cult on Vigilus achieved particularly deep penetration of the planetary government structure, with hybrid agents holding positions within the Administratum, Adeptus Arbites, and Planetary Defense Command that granted them access to classified information about Imperial strategic planning and defensive capabilities. The cult's influence extended to the highest levels of planetary administration, with several senior advisors to the planetary governor revealed as cult agents only after their simultaneous betrayal during the opening phases of the War of Beasts. The Grandsire's Gifts cult operating within Vigilus's industrial sectors demonstrated the devastating potential of cult infiltration within manufacturing and logistics operations, as embedded agents systematically sabotaged weapons production while diverting military supplies toward cult stockpiles. The cult's activities remained undetected despite producing significant disruptions to Imperial military supply chains, as their sabotage techniques created failures that appeared to result from equipment malfunctions and administrative errors rather than deliberate subversion. The coordination between Vigilus cult forces and Orkwa operations during the War of Beasts revealed the tactical flexibility of cult leadership, as hybrid commanders adapted their strategies to exploit the chaos created by multiple simultaneous conflicts. The cult's ability to benefit from orc attacks while avoiding direct confrontation with the greenskin forces demonstrated sophisticated strategic thinking that maximized cult objectives while minimizing their exposure to Imperial counter-operations. The lesser-known infestation of the agri-world Thessala Prime demonstrates how Genestealer cults can establish themselves within seemingly peaceful agricultural communities through exploitation of existing social structures and economic pressures. The world's feudal agricultural system created isolated rural communities with minimal imperial oversight, while the seasonal nature of agricultural work provided natural cover for cult-gathering activities during periods of reduced farming activity. The Thessala Prime cult achieved remarkable success in recruiting human converts through their provision of agricultural assistance and community support services that addressed practical needs ignored by imperial administrative systems. The cult's promise of improved crop yields and protection from predatory wildlife appealed to farming communities struggling with the harsh realities of frontier agricultural life, while their demonstration of genuine agricultural expertise created trust relationships that facilitated ideological conversion. The revelation of the Thessala Prime infestation occurred only when tyrannid scout organisms began appearing in the system's outer regions, triggering psychic activation of the dormant cult population that had been developing for over 2 centuries. The cult's uprising demonstrated the vulnerability of agricultural worlds to infiltration, as their dispersed populations and minimal military presence created ideal conditions for cult expansion, while their role in imperial food production made them strategically significant targets for tyrannid advance operations. The frontier mining colony of Capex underwent one of the most rapid cult infestations on record, as a single Genestealer organism introduced during routine cargo operations managed to establish a thriving cult population within 3 generations of human reproduction. The colony's isolation from Imperial oversight and its small population of specialized mining personnel created conditions that accelerated cult development while preventing early detection of the infiltration. The Capex infestation demonstrated the adaptability of Genestealer organisms to extreme environmental conditions, as the colony operated within the toxic atmosphere of a chemically polluted world that required specialized life support equipment for human survival. The Genestealer's rapid adaptation to these conditions and its successful reproduction, despite environmental hazards, revealed the remarkable biological flexibility that makes these organisms effective infiltrators across diverse planetary environments. The speed of cult development on Capex created unique challenges for Imperial response operations, as the entire colony population had become either hybrid cult members or indoctrinated human converts by the time Imperial authorities detected the infestation. The lack of uninfected humans to serve as witnesses or intelligence sources complicated efforts to understand the cult's development and organizational structure, while the colony's strategic importance as a rare mineral extraction site created pressure for rapid resolution of the crisis. The ongoing threat to frontier systems represents one of the most significant challenges facing Imperial security forces, as the vast distances between settled worlds and limited Imperial oversight capabilities create ideal conditions for undetected cult development. The pattern of infestation typically follows trade routes and shipping lanes, with Genestealer organisms spreading between worlds aboard cargo vessels and passenger transports that operate with minimal security screening. The cumulative effect of multiple simultaneous cult infestations across frontier regions creates strategic vulnerabilities that extend far beyond individual planetary concerns, as coordinated cult uprisings can disrupt entire subsector communication networks and supply chains. The revelation of cult presence on key worlds often triggers security investigations that reveal additional infestations on neighboring systems, creating cascading crises that overwhelm limited Imperial response capabilities. The psychological impact of widespread cult infiltration on Imperial frontier populations creates additional challenges for counter-infiltration operations, as civilian populations develop paranoia and suspicion that interferes with legitimate security measures while creating opportunities for actual cult agents to exploit social tensions. The difficulty of distinguishing between genuine security concerns and paranoid speculation complicates efforts to identify real threats while maintaining social stability necessary for continued Imperial administration. The detection of Genestealer cult infiltration represents one of the most challenging aspects of Imperial security operations, as these alien parasites deliberately exploit the fundamental weaknesses inherent in the Imperium's vast bureaucratic and military structures. Unlike the obvious corruption of chaos cults or the overt aggression of conventional xenos threats, Genestealer infiltration occurs through the gradual subversion of loyal Imperial citizens who retain their human appearance and behavioral patterns while serving alien objectives. The Ordo Xenos faces unique difficulties in identifying these threats, as standard investigative techniques designed for detecting heretical activity or alien invasion prove inadequate against enemies who emerge from within Imperial society itself. The specialized inquisitors of the Ordo Xenos have developed sophisticated detection methodologies that focus on identifying subtle patterns of behavior and organizational anomalies that suggest alien influence rather than relying on conventional signs of corruption or rebellion. These investigations typically begin with statistical analysis of planetary data, as inquisitorial analysts examine population records, industrial production reports, and administrative efficiency metrics for unusual patterns that might indicate non-human influence. The enhanced capabilities of hybrid agents often create detectable improvements in productivity and performance that appear beneficial on surface examination, but reveal alien characteristics when subjected to detailed scrutiny. Inquisitor Kryptman's pioneering work in developing anti-Genestealer investigation techniques established the foundational protocols that Ordo Xenos operatives continue to employ throughout the galaxy. His methodologies emphasize the importance of long-term data analysis and pattern recognition, as Genestealer infiltration creates subtle but consistent changes in planetary demographics and industrial output that become apparent only through comprehensive statistical examination spanning multiple decades. The Kryptman protocols require investigators to examine birth rates, mortality statistics, and genetic diversity indices for anomalies that suggest artificial manipulation of population genetics. The challenge of detecting hybrid infiltration within Imperial military forces requires specialized screening procedures that can identify enhanced physical capabilities and psychological conditioning without alerting potential cult members to ongoing investigations. Ordo Xenos investigators employ carefully designed physical fitness assessments and psychological evaluation procedures that appear routine while actually testing for capabilities that exceed normal human parameters. These screening protocols must remain subtle enough to avoid triggering defensive responses from embedded cult agents while providing sufficient data to identify individuals whose abilities suggest alien enhancement. Medical examination procedures developed specifically for anti-Genestealer operations focus on detecting subtle anatomical anomalies that distinguish hybrid physiology from normal human biology. These examinations require specialized equipment and trained personnel capable of identifying enlarged cranial capacity, modified bone density, and enhanced muscle fiber structure that characterizes hybrid development. The medical screening process must account for natural human genetic variation while identifying modifications that clearly indicate alien influence, a distinction that requires extensive training and experience to recognize reliably. Genetic testing represents the most reliable method for confirming Genestealer infiltration, as hybrid DNA contains distinctive markers that clearly identify alien contamination, regardless of the subject's generation or apparent humanity. However, the implementation of genetic screening programs creates significant logistical and political challenges, as comprehensive testing of planetary populations requires enormous resources while potentially triggering panic among civilian populations who interpret such measures as evidence of widespread contamination. The Ordo Xenos must balance the need for thorough investigation against the risk of creating social instability that cult agents can exploit to advance their objectives. The Death Watch represents the Imperium's most specialized military response to confirmed Genestealer threats, as these elite space marines possess the training, equipment, and experience necessary to conduct effective operations against hybrid cult forces. Unlike conventional Imperial Guard, units trained for large-scale warfare against conventional enemies, Deathwatch kill teams operate as precision instruments designed to eliminate specific alien threats through targeted strikes that minimize collateral damage while maximizing operational effectiveness. Their intimate knowledge of Xenos biology and tactical capabilities allows them to adapt their combat techniques to exploit specific vulnerabilities in Genestealer physiology and cult organization. Deathwatch operations against Genestealer cults typically involve small teams of specialists selected for their expertise in urban warfare, infiltration techniques, and anti-Xenos combat procedures. These kill teams operate with considerable autonomy, as their mission parameters require rapid adaptation to changing tactical situations and the ability to make strategic decisions without referring to higher command authority. The specialized nature of anti-Genestealer operations demands flexibility and initiative that proves incompatible with rigid military hierarchy and predetermined tactical doctrine. The equipment employed by Deathwatch forces reflects their specialized mission requirements, with weapons and gear selected specifically for effectiveness against hybrid physiology and cult tactical methods. Stalker pattern bolters provide the precision and stopping power necessary to eliminate individual targets at extended range, while maintaining the rapid fire capability required for close quarters combat against multiple opponents. The specialized ammunition employed by these weapons includes metal storm rounds designed to defeat the natural armor protection of Purestrain Genestealers and Kraken pattern bolts that deliver maximum kinetic energy transfer against enhanced hybrid bone structure. Flamer weapons prove particularly effective against Genestealer organisms due to their vulnerability to intense heat and the psychological impact of fire on hybrid forces, conditioned to operate in dark, confined spaces. The promethium-based fuel employed by Imperial flamers creates persistent fires that deny area access while inflicting damage that overwhelms the enhanced healing capabilities possessed by advanced hybrid forms. Deathwatch flame specialists employ specialized techniques that maximize area coverage while minimizing fuel consumption, allowing sustained operations in environments where resupply opportunities remain limited. The tactical doctrine employed by Deathwatch kill teams emphasizes speed, precision, and overwhelming firepower applied at critical moments when cult forces remain most vulnerable to disruption. These operations typically focus on eliminating cult leadership elements and disrupting command structures, rather than engaging in prolonged combat with rank and file cult members who can be dealt with by conventional Imperial forces once their coordination and leadership capabilities suffer degradation. The identification and elimination of Magus-level hybrids represents a priority objective, as these individuals serve as focal points for cult psychic networks and strategic planning capabilities. The challenge of locating Genestealer Patriarchs requires specialized investigation techniques that can penetrate the elaborate security measures and concealment protocols employed by mature cult organizations. Patriarchs typically establish themselves in locations that provide natural protection while remaining accessible to their hybrid offspring, often within the deepest levels of Hive cities or abandoned industrial complexes where their presence can remain undetected for centuries. The psychic emanations generated by these ancient creatures create detectable disturbances that trained psychers can identify, though the process requires considerable skill and carries significant risk of mental contamination. Deathwatch librarians employ specialized psychic techniques designed to trace Broodmind network connections back to their source, while avoiding the psychological conditioning that affects individuals who establish direct mental contact with Genestealer organisms. These operations require careful preparation and protective measures, as the alien nature of Genestealer consciousness can overwhelm human psychic defenses and create permanent mental damage in unprepared individuals. The use of psychic nulls and specialized warding techniques provides some protection against these dangers, while allowing trained psychers to gather intelligence about cult organization and leadership locations. The elimination of Genestealer patriarchs represents the most dangerous aspect of anti-cult operations, as these ancient creatures possess combat capabilities that rival those of greater demons while commanding absolute loyalty from their hybrid offspring. Patriarch lairs typically feature elaborate defensive preparations, including multiple escape routes, concealed weapon emplacements, and swarms of Purestrain Genestealers that serve as bodyguards and early warning systems. The assault on such positions requires careful planning and overwhelming force applied with surgical precision to prevent the Patriarch's escape or the activation of contingency measures that might eliminate valuable intelligence. Astra Militarum purge protocols developed for anti-Genestealer operations emphasize containment and systematic clearance rather than rapid assault, as the widespread nature of cult infiltration requires methodical approaches that prevent infected populations from escaping to establish new infestations elsewhere. These operations typically involve the establishment of quarantine perimeters around suspected cult territories, followed by systematic house-to-house searches and population screening procedures designed to identify hybrid individuals and human converts. The scale of such operations requires enormous resources and creates significant logistical challenges that strain Imperial Guard capabilities. The psychological challenges faced by Imperial Guard personnel during anti-Genestealer operations prove as significant as the tactical difficulties, as soldiers must confront enemies who appear human while demonstrating obviously alien capabilities and behaviors. The revelation that trusted colleagues, family members, and community leaders serve alien masters creates profound psychological trauma that affects unit morale and combat effectiveness. Imperial Guard commanders must address these psychological factors through intensive indoctrination procedures and the deployment of commissars trained specifically for anti-cult operations. Flame purge operations represent the most common tactical approach employed by Imperial Guard forces against confirmed Genestealer infestations, as the systematic application of incendiary weapons proves effective against both hybrid organisms and the underground tunnel networks they favor for concealment and movement. These operations typically involve specialized flame trooper units supported by combat engineers, equipped with demolition charges and tunnel clearing equipment. The extensive use of promethium creates environmental hazards that require careful coordination to prevent friendly fire incidents while maintaining operational effectiveness. Urban warfare techniques employed during anti-Genestealer operations must account for the three-dimensional nature of cult defensive positions, as hybrid forces routinely utilize sewage systems, maintenance tunnels, and abandoned industrial facilities that conventional Imperial Guard doctrine does not adequately address. The modification of standard tactical procedures requires extensive retraining and specialized equipment designed for subterranean combat operations. Combat engineers play crucial roles in these operations, as their expertise in demolition and construction techniques proves essential for collapsing tunnel systems and denying cult forces their preferred movement routes. The coordination between different Imperial military branches during large-scale anti-Genestealer operations requires sophisticated command structures that can integrate the specialized capabilities of Space Marine forces, Imperial Guard regiments, and Adeptus Mechanicus technical support while maintaining operational security that prevents cult agents from gathering intelligence about Imperial tactical plans. The compartmentalization of information and the use of code phrase systems help protect operational details while creating communication challenges that can affect coordination during critical phases of combat operations. Space Marine intervention in anti-Genestealer operations typically occurs when cult infestations reach sufficient size and sophistication to threaten strategic Imperial interests, or when conventional Imperial Guard forces prove inadequate for dealing with advanced hybrid forms and Purestrain Genestealer populations. The enhanced combat capabilities of Space Marines prove particularly effective against the most dangerous cult elements, while their psychological conditioning provides resistance to the fear and revulsion that Genestealer organisms deliberately cultivate in their enemies. However, the limited numbers of available Space Marines require careful deployment to maximize their impact while avoiding unnecessary casualties. The tactical flexibility of Space Marine forces allows them to adapt their combat techniques to exploit specific vulnerabilities in Genestealer physiology and cult organization, while their advanced equipment provides capabilities that exceed those available to conventional Imperial forces. Terminator armor proves particularly effective in confined spaces where Genestealer speed and agility advantages become reduced, while the heavy weapons capabilities of Devastator squads provide the firepower necessary to eliminate large numbers of hybrid opponents in open combat situations. The doctrine of exterminatus represents the ultimate Imperial response to Genestealer infestations that have achieved sufficient penetration to compromise planetary defensive capabilities or threaten neighboring systems through potential spread of contamination. This extreme measure reflects the recognition that some cult infestations reach stages where conventional military operations cannot guarantee complete elimination of the alien threat, particularly when approaching Tyrannid Hive fleets provide external support for cult uprising operations. The decision to implement exterminatus protocols requires authorization from the highest levels of Imperial command and represents acknowledgement that the affected world has been lost beyond any possibility of recovery. Cyclonic torpedoes represent the most commonly employed exterminatus weapon against Genestealer-infested worlds, as their massive destructive power ensures complete elimination of all biological matter on the target planet, while preventing any possibility of alien organism survival. The deployment of these weapons requires careful timing to prevent cult forces from escaping aboard spacecraft or through other means that might allow the infestation to spread to additional worlds. Naval blockade operations typically precede exterminatus implementation to ensure complete containment of the threat. The psychological impact of exterminatus operations on Imperial personnel creates lasting trauma that affects military effectiveness and morale throughout entire sectors, as the destruction of inhabited Imperial worlds represents the ultimate failure of protective duties that define Imperial military service. The necessity of such extreme measures demonstrates the existential threat posed by advanced Genestealer infestations, while highlighting the limitations of conventional Imperial defensive capabilities against enemies that emerge from within Imperial society itself. Virus bombing represents an alternative exterminatus method that proves particularly effective against biological threats such as Genestealer infestations, as the Life Eater virus systematically destroys all organic matter on the target world while leaving infrastructure and mineral resources intact for potential future Imperial use. However, the deployment of virus weapons carries significant risks of accidental contamination spread and requires extensive containment measures to prevent the biological agent from affecting Imperial forces or neighboring systems. The administrative challenges created by exterminatus operations extend far beyond the immediate military requirements, as the destruction of entire worlds creates massive refugee populations, disrupts interstellar trade networks, and eliminates strategic resources that Imperial forces require for continued operations. The Adeptus Munitorum must coordinate evacuation operations for uncontaminated populations while managing the logistical requirements of military forces deployed to contain the threat. These operations often require resources that exceed the capabilities of single-sector commands and necessitate coordination between multiple Imperial administrative branches. The investigation procedures employed following suspected Genestealer incidents require specialized techniques that can identify alien contamination while avoiding exposure to psychological conditioning effects that might compromise investigating personnel. Ordo Xenos protocols emphasize the use of servitors and automated systems for initial evidence gathering, as these mechanical agents remain immune to psychic influence while providing detailed documentation of cult activities and organizational structures. The analysis of captured cult materials requires specialized facilities equipped with psychic shielding and biological containment systems that prevent accidental exposure to alien influences. Intelligence gathering operations against active Genestealer cults require extraordinary precautions to prevent infiltration of Imperial investigation teams by cult agents who might use their positions to gather information about Imperial capabilities and tactical plans. The use of mind-wiped agents and expendable assets helps protect sensitive information while providing intelligence about cult activities and strategic objectives. However, these operations carry significant risks of personnel loss and potential compromise of ongoing security measures. The long-term monitoring of worlds that have experienced Genestealer incidents requires sustained surveillance operations that can detect signs of renewed cult activity while avoiding the resource expenditure that comprehensive planetary screening would require. These monitoring programs typically focus on statistical analysis of demographic data and industrial production reports, while maintaining networks of informants within planetary administrative structures. The challenge lies in distinguishing between normal social and economic variations and subtle signs of alien influence that might indicate emerging cult activity. The training programs developed for Imperial personnel assigned to anti-Genestealer operations emphasize psychological preparation and recognition techniques that can identify signs of alien influence while maintaining operational security that prevents cult agents from adapting their concealment methods. These programs require extensive resources and specialized instructors with direct experience in anti-cult operations, creating bottlenecks in personnel training that limit the Imperium's ability to respond effectively to multiple simultaneous infestations across different sectors. The arrival of Tyranid Hive fleets represents the culmination of decades or centuries of patient Genestealer infiltration, transforming dormant cult populations into active psychic beacons that guide the approaching swarm toward their target worlds with unprecedented precision. The psychic resonance generated by established cult networks creates navigational markers that allow Hive fleet bioships to traverse the vast distances between star systems without relying on conventional stellar navigation methods, while simultaneously providing detailed intelligence about planetary defenses and strategic resources that await consumption. This symbiotic relationship between advanced infiltration and main force assault represents one of the most sophisticated military strategies ever documented, combining biological warfare, psychological manipulation, and conventional invasion tactics into a unified campaign that exploits every weakness in Imperial defensive doctrine. The psychic beacon effect intensifies dramatically as Hive fleet vanguard organisms enter the outer system regions, triggering heightened activity within the Broodmind network that connects all Genestealer-tainted organisms across the target world. Cult members experience increasingly vivid dreams and waking visions that they interpret as divine communications from their star gods, while patriarchs receive detailed tactical information about Hive fleet capabilities and intended landing sites through direct synaptic connection to the approaching swarm. The intensity of these psychic transmissions creates observable effects that trained Imperial psychers can detect, though by this stage the approaching threat has usually advanced beyond the point where effective countermeasures remain possible. The coordination between cult uprising operations and tyrannid assault phases demonstrates remarkable tactical sophistication, as hybrid forces systematically eliminate specific defensive installations and communication networks at precisely the moments when their destruction proves most beneficial to the approaching bioships. Spaceport facilities suffer coordinated sabotage that prevents Imperial forces from launching fighter squadrons or evacuation transports, while orbital defense platforms experience simultaneous technical failures caused by embedded cult agents who have spent decades working within their maintenance crews. The timing of these sabotage operations follows patterns that maximize confusion among Imperial defenders while creating clear approach corridors for tyrannid landing craft. Cult forces demonstrate intimate knowledge of Imperial defensive protocols during these coordination phases, using their decades of infiltration to identify specific vulnerabilities in planetary shield generators, communication arrays, and automated defense systems that might otherwise inflict significant casualties on approaching tyrannid organisms. Mining charges placed by cult saboteurs create precisely targeted structural failures that disable critical systems without triggering backup protocols, while computer viruses introduced into defense networks create cascading failures that overwhelm Imperial technical personnel during the crucial hours when rapid response capabilities prove most essential. The psychic emanations generated by approaching Hive fleets create observable effects throughout cult populations that serve as early warning indicators for Imperial forces trained to recognize such phenomena, though these signs often remain subtle enough to escape detection by conventional security personnel. Cult members begin exhibiting increased agitation and unusual behavioral patterns as the synaptic pressure from the approaching swarm intensifies their alien conditioning, while hybrid individuals experience physical changes that accelerate their transformation toward more obviously alien forms. Fourth-generation hybrids may undergo rapid metamorphosis into Purestrain Genestealers during this period, shedding their remaining human characteristics as the proximity of the hive mind triggers dormant genetic programming. The arrival of tyrannid scout organisms marks the beginning of the final phase of planetary consumption, as these advanced bioforms establish landing sites and begin the systematic harvesting of biological matter that will fuel the main Hive fleet assault. Cult forces coordinate closely with these scout elements, providing detailed intelligence about Imperial defensive positions while guiding tyrannid organisms toward high-value targets that offer maximum biomass yield with minimal resistance. The cooperation between human-derived cult members and purely alien tyrannid organisms demonstrates the complete success of the genetic conditioning process, as hybrid individuals willingly sacrifice their human identities to serve the greater objectives of the hive mind. However, the moment of tyrannid arrival brings with it a devastating revelation that shatters the carefully constructed theological framework that has sustained cult devotion for generations. The star gods that cult doctrine promised would elevate worthy humans to divine status proved to be mindless consumers whose only interest lies in the systematic harvesting of all biological matter on the planet, including the cult members who have served them so faithfully. The tyrannid organisms that emerge from bioship landing craft demonstrate no recognition of cult service or devotion, treating hybrid cultists as nothing more than readily available biomass to be consumed alongside their former Imperial enemies. The psychological trauma experienced by cult members during this revelation creates scenes of horror that exceed even the worst nightmares of Imperial defenders, as devoted followers watch their alien saviors systematically devour their families, friends, and communities without distinction or mercy. Third-generation hybrids who have spent their entire lives believing in the promise of ascension find themselves fleeing from the very creatures they worshipped, while human converts discover that their years of faithful service mean nothing to entities whose only concern involves the efficient processing of organic matter into digestible compounds. Magus-level cult leaders experience the most profound psychological collapse during these revelations, as their enhanced psychic connections to the hive mind expose them to the true nature of tyrannid consciousness without the protective filters that their theological conditioning had previously provided. These individuals often suffer complete mental breakdown as they realize that their sophisticated belief systems represented nothing more than elaborate self-deception designed to facilitate their own destruction, while their enhanced cognitive abilities force them to comprehend the full scope of their betrayal of human civilization in service to entities that view them as nothing more than food. The consumption process employed by tyrannid organisms proves ruthlessly efficient, as specialized bioforms systematically harvest biomass from cult members using the same techniques applied to any other organic matter encountered during planetary digestion operations. Ripper swarms overwhelm individual cultists through sheer numbers, while larger tyrannid creatures employ their feeding appendages to drain bodily fluids and absorb tissue mass with mechanical precision that ignores the screams and pleas of their victims. The alien nature of tyrannid feeding behavior creates death scenes of particular horror, as cult members discover that their promised transformation into divine beings actually involves being dissolved alive within tyrannid digestive chambers. Some cult members attempt to resist their fate once the true nature of their situation becomes apparent, turning their weapons against the tyrannid organisms they had previously welcomed as divine messengers. However, these desperate defensive efforts prove futile against creatures whose biological design incorporates centuries of combat evolution, while the psychological trauma of their revelation severely impairs their ability to coordinate effective resistance. Former cult soldiers who had spent years training to fight Imperial forces find themselves completely unprepared for combat against opponents whose alien biology renders conventional tactics ineffective. The irony of cult members dying alongside the Imperial defenders they had betrayed creates some of the most tragic scenes in the annals of tyrannid invasion records, as former enemies find themselves united in their final moments by shared horror at the fate that awaits all organic life on their world. Imperial Guard soldiers who had watched their comrades fall to cult betrayal sometimes attempt to protect fleeing cultists from tyrannid predators, while dying cult members occasionally provide warnings about approaching bioforms to Imperial personnel they had previously sought to eliminate. These brief moments of human solidarity prove tragically futile against the inexorable advance of the Great Devourer. Yet even as established cult populations face extinction alongside their former enemies, the tyrannid consumption process ensures the continuation of the infiltration cycle through the preservation and dispersal of genestealer organisms that will seed future worlds ahead of the Hive fleet's continued advance. Specialized bioships within the tyrannid fleet serve as mobile breeding facilities where captured genestealer specimens undergo rapid reproduction cycles that produce thousands of offspring ready for deployment to new target systems. These organisms carry within their genetic structure all the accumulated knowledge and tactical experience gained from previous infiltration campaigns, creating an ever-improving biological weapon system that adapts to counter Imperial defensive measures. The dispersal of genestealer organisms follows carefully calculated patterns that maximize their chances of successful infiltration while minimizing the risk of detection by Imperial security forces, as Hive fleet strategists employ their comprehensive intelligence about Imperial shipping routes and communication networks to identify optimal deployment opportunities. Dormant genestealers secreted within cargo containers, passenger compartments, and even the hull structures of departing vessels carry the seeds of future infestations to worlds that may remain unaware of their contamination for decades or centuries. Space hulks represent particularly effective vectors for genestealer dispersal, as these massive derelict vessels travel unpredictable courses through the galaxy while offering numerous hiding places for dormant organisms waiting for optimal infiltration opportunities. The chaotic nature of space Hulk trajectories makes it virtually impossible for Imperial authorities to predict which systems might face contamination, while the valuable salvage opportunities these vessels represent ensure that Imperial recovery teams will eventually board them despite the obvious dangers involved. The modification of Imperial vessels during Tyranid assault operations creates additional dispersal opportunities, as Genestealer organisms deliberately infiltrate ships attempting to evacuate planetary populations or withdraw Imperial military forces from doomed worlds. These contaminated vessels carry their alien passengers to new systems where the infiltration process begins anew, often within Imperial fortress worlds or industrial centers that possess the infrastructure necessary to support large cult populations. The psychological conditioning that prevents most humans from recognizing Genestealer contamination ensures that these infiltrations remain undetected until they reach sufficient size to begin their own uprising cycles. The genetic diversity accumulated through successive infiltration campaigns creates increasingly sophisticated Genestealer strains that incorporate adaptive capabilities derived from encounters with different human populations and Imperial defensive systems. Each successful infiltration provides the hive mind with additional genetic templates that enhance future organism designs, while the tactical intelligence gathered by cult networks improves Tyranid understanding of Imperial military doctrine and strategic planning procedures. This continuous improvement process ensures that each new wave of Genestealer infiltration proves more effective than its predecessors. The long-term strategic implications of this infiltration cycle extend far beyond individual planetary conquests, as the cumulative effect of multiple simultaneous cult infestations creates systematic vulnerabilities throughout Imperial space that compromise the Imperium's ability to mount effective resistance against Tyranid advance. Worlds that might serve as staging areas for Imperial counterattacks instead become battlegrounds where internal rebellion combines with external invasion to overwhelm defensive capabilities, while the loss of industrial centers and agricultural worlds creates resource shortages that affect Imperial military operations across entire sectors. The dormant nature of Genestealer contamination creates a persistent threat that may remain undetected for centuries before manifesting as active cult populations, as organisms introduced during previous Tyranid campaigns continue their slow reproductive cycles within Imperial populations that remain completely unaware of their alien taint. These sleeper infestations represent time bombs that await activation by future Hive fleet approaches, creating the potential for simultaneous uprisings across vast regions of Imperial space that could overwhelm even the most comprehensive defensive preparations. The psychological impact of widespread Genestealer infiltration creates additional strategic advantages for Tyranid forces, as Imperial populations develop paranoia and suspicion that interferes with legitimate security measures, while creating social tensions that cult agents can exploit to accelerate their infiltration efforts. The knowledge that any Imperial citizen might harbor alien contamination creates an atmosphere of fear and mistrust that degrades social cohesion and makes effective counter-infiltration operations increasingly difficult to implement and maintain. The eternal nature of the Genestealer threat ensures that the Imperium faces a continuous struggle against an enemy that adapts and evolves with each encounter, learning from Imperial defensive measures while developing new infiltration techniques that exploit previously unknown vulnerabilities. The biological imperative driving these organisms transcends individual survival or territorial conquest, representing instead a galaxy-spanning campaign of genetic corruption that seeks the ultimate transformation of all human life into biomass suitable for Tyranid consumption. The Great Devourer's approach transforms loyal Imperial citizens into unwitting agents of their own destruction, while the promise of salvation becomes revealed as merely another tool in the tyrannid arsenal of biological warfare. The cycle continues endlessly across the galaxy, as new worlds fall to infiltration, while survivors carry the seeds of future contamination to systems that believe themselves safe from alien corruption. In the grim darkness of the far future, the patient whisper of alien genes spreads through human bloodlines like a plague that cannot be cured, only temporarily contained, until the next Hive fleet arrives to claim its harvest of corrupted souls and willing flesh. The ultimate horror of Genestealer cults lies not in their alien nature, but in their fundamentally human origin, the transformation of Imperial citizens into willing collaborators in their own species' destruction through the slow corruption of genetic heritage and spiritual faith. As the Great Devourer continues its inexorable advance across the galaxy, the tainted bloodlines it leaves in its wake ensure that humanity's greatest enemy may ultimately prove to be humanity itself, corrupted beyond recognition, yet retaining just enough human consciousness to understand the magnitude of their betrayal in the final moments before consumption claims them all.